Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live, and tonight we got our special guest here with us, Timothy Alberino. And as you guys know, we had him, I think, roughly 3 to maybe 4 weeks ago on our show, and he's also been on the Hagman report. And what I find really interesting is, you know, we see so many things coming across our news headlines on a daily standpoint, but nobody really seems to be going in depth as to where it is going. And it's because they did everything to keep themselves distracted. I mean, you got all this entertainment and all these things that they defy as fun, and why everybody's out there doing this. Their lives are being stripped from them. Why they're just they're tied up in all that. Anyways, I'd like to get right to it, Tim. Just give us a briefing on your current standpoint on what you would like to bring to the table tonight. I'll kind of just let you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Clint. It's good to be with you this evening. I'll tell you what. I've been reading up on the Ebola situation lately, today, yesterday. Listened to the Dave Hodges program. Well, listened to the Hagman program from the other day with Dave Hodges, in which he was talking about some different situations, but particularly Ebola. And he dropped some really powerful bombs during that show in terms of information, connecting the dots to how the CDC is connected with the patents and for both the Ebola virus and for the vaccine that they're developing, which is probably already developed. And very powerful. If you haven't heard it, I suggest that people go and listen to that sometime. But this Ebola situation, I think, is the implications are more dire than what people realize. And I'm not even necessarily referring to the implications of Ebola itself. I'm referring to the implications of the vaccine. I believe that the Ebola vaccine is more dangerous than Ebola itself. What people don't understand, what we need to start to understand, is genetics. Because basically what a virus does is a virus infiltrates a cell, and it's carrying a payload of genetic information. It deposits that genetic information into the cell. The cell then incorporates that genetic information into the into the gene factory of the cell, and it begins to reproduce the virus inside of the cells, and that whole process is reproduced throughout the whole body. Well, what scientists are doing, what geneticists have been doing for years, is using viruses as vectors to carry genetic information. Basically, they'll empty out the genetic information that the virus is carrying, in most cases something that's dangerous, virulent to the human body, and they'll replace it with their own genetic information, their own base pairs that they want to incorporate into the human body or into an animal to bring about a genetic change, or into a plant. That's one of the ways that they used to do genetic engineering. They still do it that way to some degree, but they've gotten a little more sophisticated. The reason why I'm talking about a virus is because the Ebola virus the vaccine for the Ebola virus is going to work to a degree when it comes out. It's going to work because there's a lot of money invested in it. And so they need it to work, otherwise they're not going to make their money. And when I say there's a lot of money invested in it, it's Bill Gates, for example, just donated over $500 million to a vaccine for the Ebola virus. Now, what's really, really scary, if you've ever seen somebody die of the Ebola virus, that's scary enough. I mean, that'll keep you awake at nighttime, thinking about your family members, especially if you're like me and you have children, thinking about your children getting this horrifying virus where more than half the people who are contracting it are dying. I think it's somewhere around 80, 75, or 80% at this point, maybe even higher, because the virus is mutating. And according to Dave Hodges' information, which I think he's right on the mark, the virus is airborne, which that's something that Steve Quayle told me right from the get-go, that the virus was airborne. So these guys have been accurately predicting what's going on with this Ebola situation. But What the point I want to make here, and the reason why I brought up the virus, how they use it to introduce genetic information into your body using a virus vector, is because, like I said, the cure, the vaccine for the virus is ultimately going to be more harmful to the human race than Ebola itself. As terrible as Ebola is, people basically bleed from every orifice on their body, including their skin, including their pores in some cases, and their eye and their tear ducts and everything like that. The virus, the vaccine, I should say, has the potential to modify humanity genetically on a global scale. I'm going to say that again. The Ebola virus is going to have the potential to modify the genetics of humanity on a global scale. And what I mean by that is that all of these vaccines that they're developing, because of where we are with genetic engineering at this point, because we have perfected genetic engineering under the ground, in the underground basis. But what the public sees, even in the public arena, we've advanced leaps and bounds in genetic engineering. And most of the public isn't aware of this, but we can already, at this point in time, we are already capable of changing a baby's complexion, hair color, eye color, and some of the more superficial characteristics of the child while it's in the womb. We have that technology right now. So we've advanced far more than the public's aware in genetic engineering. Remember that Monsanto is one of the entities, one of the companies that's funding the vaccine. Bill Gates, Monsanto, and some other very suspicious corporations and groups of people are behind this vaccine, not to mention the CDC. So here's the deal. This Ebola vaccine, if they wanted to, and they do, but I don't know if they're going to implement this on a large scale yet, but I have a feeling they're going to begin. They can begin to literally change the genetic code of the human race through the Ebola vaccine, because the idea for the Ebola vaccine, and this is why these guys are all getting in the game, this is what Dave Hodges brought out the other day on the Hagman program and confirmed, is that there's trillions of dollars invested in this, because it is going to be a global pandemic, and there is going to be a universal call for vaccination. And it most probably will be mandatory vaccination. I really hope we don't have to go down that path in the United States, because that's going to cause civil unrest. Because there's a lot of people out there, including myself, who are not going to comply with a mandatory vaccination. And I think it's a moral issue at this point. The reason why it's a moral issue, it's not just dangerous, it's a moral issue at this point because of the genetic technology. We have to be very, very careful with vaccines, because viruses can be vectors, platforms for genetic modification. They are vectors and platforms for genetic modification. Most vaccines use some kind of genetic technology at this point, if not all vaccines. They do different things with different kinds of vaccines. So I want you just to picture this, Clint. The Ebola virus breaks out. Doesn't even have to break out worldwide, by the way. All it has to do is all we have to find are some cases popping up in the United Kingdom or in the United States, even in China, in a first or second world country, or in a couple of them. If that happens, I'm sure it's already happening under the table, so to speak. But if it starts to get out of control and they can't hide it, and we start to find information on people contracting the Ebola viruses in first and second world countries, it will be called a global pandemic, and there will be a call for mandatory vaccines on a global scale. That is a more frightening thought to me than Ebola, because you can contract Ebola, you can survive Ebola, by the way. The chances aren't that great, but you can. I think a healthy person might have a decent shot at surviving Ebola. But even if Ebola kills you, if you're obviously, I have a biblical paradigm. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, then you die and you go to be with the Father. But if you take the vaccine and the vaccine has the potential to alter your genetics, then something even more frightening than death can begin to happen. And that is a genetic alteration that begins to transform or replace your human trademarks, the genetic trademarks that make you human. Look, we as human beings, we are, and people have heard these figures cited probably many times, but we are 99 to 98% the same, similar in our genetics to a chimpanzee, about 97% the same to a gorilla. We're 85 to 92% the same in terms of genetically speaking, or similar, as a mouse. 44% to a fruit fly, 26% to yeast, and 18% to plants. That means that the totality of our genome, which is all of the genes collectively, all of the base pairs and genes collectively makes up our genomes, divided into the 23 analogous pairs of chromosomes that we have. When you add all of those together and you compare it with that of a chimp's, we're 98 to 99% the same genetically. And the reason why I'm saying that is just to show you that, and even though that represents millions of base pairs are the individual rungs on the genetic ladder, even though that represents millions of base pairs, it still goes to show you that it doesn't take too much genetic engineering to fundamentally change our species. And again, Ebola is a very scary disease. It's a horrifying disease. It's one of the most horrifying diseases out there. But genetic alteration on a mass scale, on a global scale, to me, is far more horrifying because I believe it has eternal ramifications for the human soul. We have a Redeemer in Jesus Christ who came, was born of a virgin, the Bible says he became like us in every way. That means he became a human being. That's why he called himself the Son of Man. He was always the Son of God. He became the Son of Man. And Jesus died for us, for our race, for the human race, for the genetic human race. He became us. He paid for let's say it this way. He rectified our condition, the condition of sin and death, on the cross with the shedding of his blood, so that, listen to me, the human race can be rectified to the Father, can be restored to the Father. The human race, not a hybrid race. Jesus' death on the cross does not rectify fallen angels to the Father. It doesn't rectify non-human entities to the Father. It rectifies the human race, exclusively the human race to the Father. So we have to be careful. There's a lot of people out there talking about defending our liberty, defending our rights, defending the Republic of the United States. Let me tell you something. There's an even greater situation. There's an even greater issue at stake. Defending our humanity, the trademarks that make us human. And believe me, the power brokers and the priests of power that are governing our society want to change our they want to alter our genetics as human beings. They have a very strategic reason for wanting to do this, and this is a direct order that's coming down from the highest ranks in the kingdom of darkness. And when I say that, I'm talking about fallen angels all the way up to Lucifer, as fantastical as that sounds. Clint?
Oh, absolutely. And I couldn't agree any more. That sums it up. That really does. And, that's one of the things that I address often during our shows is those fallen angels, those 200-plus fallen angels that God had cast out of heaven. They have not went anywhere, and they are still here, and they have one goal, and that is to keep everyone too distracted to make sure that they don't know the truth. Meanwhile, they'll be taking everything from them. They give you all these technologies and these machines and these devices that you have that, keep your everyday life busy and too distracted on, the sole purpose of being human. And basically, the more important reason, God gave us life here on earth, And we need, people need to recognize that gift alone, and instead of living upon these distractions and these outside influences that just, they go upon their everyday lives, living on influences of others, and the influences of others either changes their ways of thought or alters their way of life. And it seems like 9 out of 10 people are doing this on a daily basis.
That's right. And while people are busy with their iPhones and with their Facebook and their Twitter and all these other meaningless, trivial distractions, the priests of power behind the scene are getting ready to hatch a plot to literally steal away the trademarks of your humanity. And let me get in a little bit into why they're interested in doing this. I want to remind everybody that Jesus said, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Now, the days of Noah, the number one demarcation, the delineating situation that was happening in the days of Noah can be summed up as follows: genetic corruption. Genetic corruption. The Bible confirms this. The Book of Enoch confirms this. The Book of Giants confirms this. That not only did these angels fall in Genesis 6, they came down in the days of Jared, whose name, by the way, means shall come down. Came down in the days of Jared, and they basically had intercourse with women. They took wives from the sons of men, and they had intercourse, and as a result, they created progeny for themselves. And the progeny that these women, the children that these women bore, were superhuman. They were part human, part angel. The Book of Enoch says that they were primarily angel, but they were part human, part angel. And they happened to be giants. They happened to be very large. They were very powerful, very large, very intelligent, and they were probably interdimensional because they retained many of the capabilities of their fathers, of the fallen angels, of the 200 Watchers specifically. And so, but these, according to the Book of Giants, which I'm doing an analysis on right now, the Book of Giants says that these Watchers chose for themselves different species of animals besides the women. They chose for themselves different species of animals, including donkeys and other animals that are named specifically in the Book of Giants, which is fragmented, so we don't have the whole story, but we have bits and pieces. And they purposely had intercourse, sexual intercourse with these animals in order to breed what the Book of Giants literally calls monsters. They purposefully generated monsters. They fathered monsters, monstrosities, half human, half whatever. I personally think that the dinosaurs came as a result of this, but that's neither here nor there. The point I'm making is this: like I said, what is the defining issue of the days of Noah? The defining issue of the days of Noah is genetic corruption. We cannot allow ourselves to be distracted, like you were saying, Clint, to the degree that we do not understand the times in which we live. You will not understand the times in which you live by watching TV or playing video games or being on Facebook, because most of what's happening is happening below the radar, so to speak. It's not all of it's happening in secret. Much of it is happening in plain sight, but it's not being publicized on a daily basis like the lives of celebrities or the activities of Justin Bieber or something like that, or the NFL players that are punching their wives in the face and smoking weed and whatever else they're doing. Those things are meaningless. They're trivial. But when we talk about genetics, we are literally talking about the power, the ability, the capability right now reinstitute the cause of the flood. Okay? Let me say it again. We're talking about the ability to reinstitute the very thing that caused the great flood, the great judgment that came in the antediluvian world. We're doing it right now. We are developing the technology, and the technology is already here to be able to genetically modify all flesh. The Bible says that in those days, in the antediluvian times before the flood, all flesh was corrupted. That's what we're heading into, and we're slamming on the gas pedal. It's not something that we're easing into. It's something that we are rushing towards. We're charging towards this apocalyptic scenario in which the genetic trademarks, not only of the human race, but of all life, can be altered. Listen, if they were to create, for example, which they already have, what's called super mice that have super mouse strength and cognitive capabilities. They've been able to engineer smarter mice, faster mice, stronger mice, just like they're doing with super soldiers with human beings. They started with animals. They started with mice because, again, mice are 85 to 92% similar to us genetically. So what if they genetically modified a bunch of these mice, okay? This is just to give you an example. Let's say they genetically modified 1,000 of these mice, okay? And they released them into the wild. Well, when these super mice procreate, guess what? They pass on a lot of those genetic trademarks. They pass on a lot of those genetic markers. A lot of that stuff is inheritable that they're doing. We know that that's the case with Monsanto's genetically modified plants. We know that's the case with there are insects right now that have been eating those genetically modified plants for years and years. Some of those plants were modified so that they would be poisonous to the insects. But what's happening in nature is that those insects, their bodies are adapting to that genetic change, and they're becoming basically their species are slowly being altered in the wild in adaptation to the genetically modified food that they're eating. And so if we were to, going back to this scenario, if we were to release 1,000 genetically modified mice, super mice, into a certain area, they could, theoretically speaking, procreate more genetically modified mice. Now take that on a human scale. What if all of these vaccinations that we've been taking for years and years and years, those people out there who've been taking them, are slowly changing our genetics? Well, what happens is generation after generation, you get a gradual modification of the human race. And then every now and again, what they're going to start to do, I believe starting with this Ebola virus, you get a larger chunk of genetic modification that's just adding on to the modification that's already been happening on a gradual pace, at a gradual pace, if that makes sense to you. So in other words, what I'm trying to point out to everybody is how easy it is to corrupt all flesh. We're certainly corrupting the flora world. We're certainly corrupting the plants and the crops of this planet. Before long, you won't be able to find indigenous corn. Before long, you won't be able to find indigenous potatoes, indigenous rice, especially at least in the United States, but even all over the globe, because it's like a domino effect. Once you get that thing rolling, it just begins to saturate. It begins to move through nature like a tidal wave. That's why God had to destroy the world with a flood and reset everything. Why didn't he just reset the human race? Why didn't he just kill all the humans and the giants and reset the human race? Why did he have to destroy every living thing on the planet? Simple. Because everything was genetically corrupted. So people have to understand, this is one of the things that I'm supremely interested in, is because we are living in an age unprecedented except by the antediluvian world. And that is a scary thought. It's a scary thought on many, many levels. But basically, we have to ask a question, and this is a fundamental question that nobody is asking, Clint. Nobody's asking it, but I'm asking it. I'm asking it because it is one of the most important questions that we can ask at this point. What happens when humanity loses the genetic trademarks, or begins to lose the genetic trademarks of its humanity. When mankind begins to lose those genetic trademarks that make us human, there is, biblically speaking, there is authority associated with being a human being. That's clearly defined in the Bible. It's defined pre-flood and it's defined post-flood. It's defined pre-flood in the Garden of Eden, when God creates the human race in His own image. The expressed image of God, by the way, is the Son of God. So we were literally created in the image of Jesus Christ. He is the blueprint of the human race. And we were created human. We were made to be human beings, a very specific, unique species on this planet. So when we were created as human beings, we were given a realm and a scope of authority and dominion. And that is, again, very clearly delineated in the book of Genesis. We are told to subdue the earth, to take dominion, or to have dominion. We were given dominion of the face of the earth. We were given dominion over the birds and the beasts of the fields and the fish of the sea. That's not just flowery language. That's not just some kind of a metaphor. That's literal. The human race has legal rights, legal authority to have dominion of this planet. Understand that. Our race, our genetic species, has been given, endowed by God, with the right, bestowed with the responsibility, the privilege of having dominion over this planet. But understand this, it is the human race in which that authority resides. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
It's the human race.
You know, that has a lot to do with the basis of the kind of information that we really try to push to get out there to people. You know, this isn't, out of all things that is talked about on these both alternative media and these these television shows where they try to talk about history and everything, this should be one thing that is addressed out of all that, because it's so important. And there is no other important.
That's right. And I'm an implications guy. I always think in terms of implications. And I have a philosophical mind, and I think in terms of implications. So what are the implications then if the human race, with the God-given authority to govern, to have dominion on this planet, loses the trademarks associated with that authority? What I mean by that, it was the human race that was given that authority. The human race that was to take dominion, was given the mandate to take dominion. By the way, we're not just talking about believers in Jesus Christ. We're talking about our species. The human race was given authority, both the wicked and the righteous together, as a race, as a people, were given the authority, the dominion of the planet. And it was reiterated after the flood with Noah. So God reestablished it. He reestablished it after the flood. With Noah, he gave the same mandate to Noah and his descendants, that he was to take dominion of the earth. That is a mandate. You want to know why that's a mandate? Here's the scary thing, guys. If we don't do it, somebody else will. If the human race can no longer claim the authority and the dominion over the planet that was given, bestowed upon us by God, because we are no longer genetically human enough to claim it, something else, somebody else will be able to contend with us for that dominion. And as far-fetched as it sounds, I'm telling you, it is a biblical principle. So there is a diabolical plot being hatched behind the scenes. It is far more deadly than people think. There are a myriad, listen to me closely, there are a myriad of entities living in the earth, inside of the earth, entities that are living inside of other planets, not on the surface, but inside of them, within them, underneath the ground. These entities that are on the earth, and they are here, believe me, and I'm not just talking about ethereal creatures, I'm talking about corporeal, flesh and blood creatures that are constrained, that have to live in the shadows and in the caverns of the earth because they do not have dominion of the earth like the human race does. That is the only reason why we maintain dominion of this planet. That is the reason why fallen angels cannot usurp our authority, destroy us all, and set up their own kingdom. Why? Because God gave us dominion, and He is the one who defends our dominion. He is the one who makes sure that His word is honored and respected, that His word is kept. I always say the devil cannot cheat at a game with God. He can't cheat. It's impossible. You cannot cheat in a game with God. You have to play by the rules, and you have to find a way to bend the rules, so to speak. But you can't break them. Just like those 200 fallen angels that came, the watchers that came and broke the rules. Well, what happened to them? They were put in chains of darkness. Those 200 watchers that fell in the days of Jared are right now in utter torment. They're in the most horrific situation right now because of what they did. They're chained in everlasting darkness because of what they did to the genetics of first and foremost the human race, but also to the genetics of life on the planet. So that's what God thinks about messing with the genetics of life. That's what He thinks about screwing with the blueprints of the creation that He created. And the book of Enoch actually says that their torment, referring to those 200 watchers, is so terrible that the angels cannot look at them. They cannot look upon those fallen watchers who are in torment right now. It is so bad that they have to turn their face away. And I'm talking about Michael and all the other angels and the archangels have to literally turn their face away because the torment is so horrible. The torment that those 200 watchers who fell in Genesis 6 are subject to and will be for eternity. And that is where the lot of fallen man resides, is with the fallen angels. The lot of a fallen man, a man who dies in his sins, a man who dies in his fallen condition, will reside with those fallen angels and the devil, ultimately, in everlasting flames. The rectification of the human race is in Jesus Christ. He is the rectification of our condition, and when I say our condition, I'm talking specifically about sin and death. Not just war and pestilence and racism, no, specifically sin and death. By the way, all of nature is suffering because of our condition. You might say that all of nature is suffering with our condition. There was no death. There was no conflict in nature in the beginning when God created everything. The animals, after He created them in the Garden of Eden, they were not permitted to eat one another. They didn't eat one another. No creature ate flesh in the beginning. Even after the fall, man was commanded not to eat flesh until the flood. After the flood, then he was allowed to eat flesh. And there's some very strategic reasons why, and George Pember gets into that a little bit in his book, Earth's Earliest Stages. But it's very interesting. It's very interesting to think about the scenario that we're walking into, that we are rushing into right now, and we are purposely blinded. They don't want us to understand they don't want us to understand that part of the great plot, part of this great design that they've been manufacturing, this great conspiracy that they've been manufacturing behind the scenes, is literally to restore the earth to the way it was, or something similar, in the antediluvian world. They call that the Golden Age. They say that's when the gods mingled with men, and that you had these god-men walking around, which is true, and they were vastly more intelligent. They were superior to us in every way. They had superior technology. Yes, it's true, but what they don't realize is that those god-men those giants and hybrids and monsters were devouring the human race. That's something that they don't add into the equation. They were literally devouring the human race. And again, as fantastical as that sounds, guess what? That's where we are headed. These entities are waiting for the opportunity to come back on the scene. And we're being tricked into setting the stage for that to be able to happen on a global scale. And so when this, going back to the Ebola virus, vaccine I should say, when this Ebola vaccine comes out, if it is one of the first steps to altering the genetics of the human race, it is, with some other things that are coming out, not just the Ebola vaccine, with a number of other things that are going on, literally the end of humanity as we know it. Understand that. It is the end of humanity as we know it. The stakes are far higher than people realize. The stakes are not just the Republic of the United States. The stakes are not just being ruled by a global elite. The stakes are not just the New World Order. The stakes are our very humanity. That's what they're really after, all right? That's what the real goal is. That's why the Antichrist is not going to be fully human, in my opinion, my very strong opinion. He's not going to be fully human. They want to lead us into the golden race, which is a conjunction of the golden age. Again, they believe, and when I say they, I'm talking about those individuals, those secret societies and the occult that's driving everything that's going on, including this Ebola virus. They are working overtime to bring about a reemergence of the golden age, of the mingling of the gods with men and of the genetic corruption of all flesh. They don't see it as corruption. They see it as ascendancy. They see it as apotheosis. They see it as humanity evolving into a godlike condition, a godlike state. Of course, the Illuminati, some of those factions, want the grand majority of our populace to be gone before that happens. They want us wiped off the face of the earth. They only want about 500 million, as many people are very well aware. But nonetheless, they want humanity to evolve, especially themselves. But even if they think that it's only going to be themselves, then they may be laboring, hear me out, they may be laboring, and I'm talking about the Illuminati, they may be laboring under the delusion that only they themselves are going to transcend and evolve. They may be thinking that they're going to succeed in their plan and they're going to wipe out 500 million people off this planet. That is surely what many of them are working towards. There's different factions, but that's for another program. However, I do not believe that they're going to accomplish that because I see something coming after that. And what's coming after that is far more terrifying. As horrible as being ruled by the global elite on a prison planet sounds, there's something worse. And what's going to happen is a deception. Humanity is going to be led into a new golden age and turned into a new golden race. And those two terms are very strategic. I use those terms very purposefully because the golden age is what I explained it. As I explained it, is the mingling of gods with men, and the time when culture and society and technology flourished, and it did, but for them, not for the human race. The human race was devoured. Those who were not genetically altered. That's what we're coming into again in terms of the golden age. The gods mingling with men again, the genetics being altered. But that's specifically for the human race being altered genetically. That's called the golden race. And we're going to be led into the golden race by non-human entities that are going to come and are going to convince the grand majority of the earth under the leadership of the Antichrist that the human race must evolve. We must evolve or we're going to destroy ourselves. we're going to destroy our planet, or we're going to come under the thraldom of the Illuminati, and they're probably going to reveal the alien situation, the gray aliens. They're going to try and play good guy, bad guy. They're going to try and set up a scapegoat, the bad guy, the Illuminati, and the non-human factions working with them, and the good guy themselves, led by the Antichrist, leading mankind into apotheosis. That, my friend, is Luciferianism. It is the pinnacle. It is the Garden of Eden full circle.
Absolutely. And that sums it up right there. I mean, I don't think I could have even spoke that well as far as pointing people in the direction of what that really actually pertains to and why it matters. And you're talking about, people that are just tied into politics or tied in with knowing that their government's doing this or that. And, the more me and you and others are starting to look at it, we're starting to see, this whole government scenario and this whole leadership is all nothing but an implementation to keep people following it. And it's then when you realize this, you stand back and see where it's headed. And I tell you what, it does not look good. And like you said, we are headed into that golden era again. And back before the Great Flood, people on this earth, there was normal people, and there was, like you had referenced earlier, hybrids and extra-dimensional beings, if you would, and all these sophisticated technologies and altercations of not only human, but the entirety of life on Earth. And that's when some guy that they called crazy built a giant ship, and God told him to take the creatures of the earth and put them on that boat, and everybody thought he was crazy. And lo and behold, the rest of them were swallowed in the abyss. And it just goes to show, if somebody like that comes in our time, and I look for it to happen, maybe not in the near future, but somewhere nearby, that we're going to see people like that rise again. Because, Jesus, he did make the quotation that people will come and do even greater wonders than I. That there kind of says, well, wait, we ain't seen that yet, but are we soon to see it? And I think we're going to. But people, like you had referenced earlier about people taking these beings or the grays as a savior, as somebody that's coming here to help us, when the truth is being spoke, people will just blow it off, and I don't know how you would word it, but basically disgrace of what you're saying, just the way they did Jesus. And you're going to see a lot of that, where Jesus himself said that many men will face trials, and even some of us put to death for his name's sake. And that says a lot. That means there's going to be a point in time where people are killed just for thinking of him. And they already are. I mean, they are overseas. But, that's just, that's a small portion. Imagine that kind of horrific thing going on over the world, where if you even mention the name Jesus, that somebody wants to end your life. I mean, that's just horrifying, evil. I mean, there's no word to put on that as far as evil. And, I think that's where we are faced at. We are faced at that golden era, as you had mentioned, and people need to wake up from these politics. They need to wake up from the, as bad as I hate to say it, I am for freedom. I do like freedom and enjoy it, and I know we all do. But as far as trying to correct the powers that govern us, or that are supposedly our leaders, that we ourselves gave power to, because we were just too dumb to see it, I guess. Those on the scene, as important as a lot of you out there might think that they are just one big, I don't know what would be the best way to put this, an illusionary tactic to keep you from realizing what is fixing to happen. And if you're not aware of this, these coming times...
I don't even know how many of them are human at this point, Clint. I don't even know how many of them are human at this point, Clint. Now, that sounds like a excessively fantastical thing to say. But listen, first of all, I want to make a point. You mentioned the Noah and the ark and God bringing the animals. Isn't it interesting that God himself brought the animals? God made sure to go and gather animals that were not corrupted genetically. This is a very, very, very serious issue to God. He does not like when we play with the blueprint of life. He doesn't like it. It makes him extremely angry, and we ought to fear God and God's wrath more than all the demons in hell and Illuminati and everybody else combined. You don't want God as your enemy. You're better off having Satan as your enemy than God. You're better off having 1,000 Satans as your enemy than God. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're making God our enemy, not those of us who are believers in the Lord Jesus Christ and have received the testimony of his Son, but the human race collectively that is basically slapping him in the face and altering the genetics of life on Earth. And listen, there's people who are going to listen to this or are going to listen to the rebroadcast of this show who are going to roll their eyes. They're going to scoff. They're going to say that's ridiculous. There's going to be Christian people and non-Christian people who are going to say that's stupid, that's ridiculous, that's a fantasy. But you know what? Too bad. That's my answer to you. That's my reply to you. Too bad, because it's happening right now, right under your nose, whether you believe it or not. Doesn't make a damn difference at this point. It doesn't make a difference if you believe it or if you don't. And I'm speaking to those scoffers who've been scoffing all these years when people have been talking about genetic engineering and super soldiers and all this stuff. Just because you don't see it on your TV show or on your news program, people scoff. But again, too bad, because it's happening, and it's happening at such an alarming rate. It's happening on every single level. It's happening in the food we eat. It's happening at the Pentagon and all the super soldier programs, and not just the Pentagon, all the different first world nations and second world nations and military powers around the globe are developing this genetic technology. They are already beginning to alter the human race. It's going to surface from being a primarily military thing, like so many things do. It's going to trickle down from military technology to the public, to the general public. And this technology, this genetic altering technology, will become a part of people's lives. And all the while, we're just going to be continuing to spit in God's face. To spit in God's face. Listen, the first time we did it, the first time the human race did it, a flood came. The Bible tells us the second time it's going to be fire and brimstone. That's what this is all culminating towards. That's where this is all going. It's going to literally go down in flames. Humanity is engineering its demise right now. We are engineering our demise. Whether people like it or not, whether or not they want to believe it, it makes no difference. It is stone cold fact. All the military people, all the geneticists, they all know it. Humanity is being fundamentally altered, along with the various species on the planet, the various different species on the planet. Now, you said something that I want to definitely talk about tonight, which is people have to understand. And again, this is something that people are going to think that I'm crazy and that I'm off my rocker. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because it's real and it's happening. And everybody's going to know it's real and it's happening, by the way, before long. I don't know when, but it will happen. We are not the only sentient entities inhabiting the earth. We are just not. It's as bizarre as that sounds to people, it is true. We are not the only sentient entities inhabiting the earth. There are entities, many of whom I believe are remnants from a pre-flood world that still exist on this planet, but they're primarily under the ground. And there are other entities which we are more familiar with. Those who have a biblical paradigm are obviously familiar with unclean spirits, demons, and the like. But what people don't understand, and we have to understand this is something that maybe, 100 years ago, it wasn't really that crucial for people to understand. People could live and die. And without this kind of understanding, and it wouldn't really have too much bearing on their lives. But we don't have that luxury anymore. We don't have the luxury to be ignorant about the things that we're talking about tonight, especially genetics. Listen, folks, you don't have the luxury to be ignorant about it anymore, because there is an Ebola vaccine coming. And if it's not an Ebola vaccine, it'll be some other vaccine coming down the pipe that is going to alter your genetics. It is going to alter your genetics, and you're going to have to make a decision. You're going to have to make a decision, a willful decision against ignorance. You're going to have to make a decision, to discern, to become informed, and to wake up, because it's coming, whether you're awake or not. Whether you're awake or not, these things are not going to wait for everybody to get comfortable with them, and to turn them over and ruminate over them for 2 and 3 and 4 years, and read a book here, read a book there. I'm sorry, it's coming, and it is coming like a tidal wave, and there is nothing anybody can do to stop it. That's what you were saying about these political leaders. Everybody was talking about these political leaders in the liberty movement, basically kicking the bums out and putting in new people. Well, the problem is that I don't even believe that all of these people who are in positions of government are even human, are even fully human. I think that we have a situation now on the planet, and again, let the scoffers scoff. It doesn't matter. It is reality. We have a situation right now where we have cloning technology that is far more advanced than what anybody is aware of, anybody that's basically in the public scene, in the public arena. Many generals and many different military people and scientists know, but not many people in the public arena are aware exactly how far we've advanced under the ground with genetics and with cloning specifically. We have advanced leaps and bounds in cloning. We can clone a human being. We can make them look exactly like the person who the genetic material is coming from, to clone them. And that then infers, if that is true, it then infers that there are clones already among us. Again, that sounds like a Star Wars movie or something out of Star Trek. That's why they put those movies out there, so that when you hear these things, you automatically associate them with fiction, with movies. That's why they push these movies. That's why they purposely, the CIA and these different entities, the NSA and these different government factions purposely come and consult with these people who are making these movies and promote their movies, because it fulfills their agenda. It is a form of mind control, so that when you hear the term of alien or flying saucer, you automatically view it as fiction. You relate it to a movie. That's the context in which you can relate to that. So when you say clone, when I say that there are clones walking around, the only context that people have in their minds to be able to relate the idea of clones walking around on the planet is fiction. Is fiction. Even though there is so much real hardcore data on cloning out there. They're cloning things like crazy right now. And much of it's popped out into the open. And scientists have come out of the woodwork admitting that they're cloning things behind the scenes, away from the view of the public. So that's what I'm saying. Rather than hearing me say clone and associating it with all the facts and the news stories that have trickled out, instead, boom, instantly we relate it to some movie. That is part of the mind control. People have to wake up to that. They have to understand that they want these key words to trigger fiction. They want keywords to trigger fiction and to trigger the word conspiracy. That was actually, I think it was a CIA initiative back in the 60s. So we have to understand this is fundamental. Again, 100 generations ago, this wasn't absolutely necessary to know. Guess what? It is now. Because if this stuff doesn't affect you, I promise you, it's going to affect your children. It is going to affect your children. And if we are wise parents, and if we are God-fearing parents, we prepare our children for what is coming. We prepare our children for the future in which they're going to live. We have to understand the times in which we live. We cannot be ignorant sheep. So, I want people to understand that human beings are not the only sentient entities on the planet. And when I say sentient, I mean consciousness, that we are consciously aware of ourselves. We are not the only ones. There are a multitude of other creatures, and they are all fallen. Let me say that again. They're all fallen. They're all in a state of rebellion against God. If they're not, then they would declare the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is the benchmark in the Bible for discerning spirits. What do they say about the gospel of Jesus Christ? That's the benchmark. But it's not just, we're not just talking about, again, one species or one specific thing. We are talking about multitudes of entities that have been cohabiting this planet with us for many, many years. Since the beginning, I believe, some of them, but not all of them. And I know that this is a mind blower for a lot of people, but I feel compelled at this point in time to break this down for some people, because some people are trying to understand this. They're on the fence. They don't know what to think about it. Jumping into the UFO topic, we can for example, there are a lot of Christian people out there who are trying to digest the reality of flying saucers, because at this point, you can't deny it. All you can do is try and digest it and assimilate it into your world paradigm. You can't deny it anymore. Even the most ignorant of people pretty soon are going to have to deal with the idea of advanced technology, flying saucers, and the like, because it's real. And so what a lot of Christians do with this topic is they will there's two catchphrases that they take and they pin it on the topic, and they feel like they have pinned it down. They've pinned it down well enough to understand it and to deal with it, and I'm saying it's not enough. And those two words are demon and Nephilim. So whenever somebody talks about flying saucers or aliens, a lot of people will automatically pin that with the term demon or Nephilim. Close, but not exactly. Because what we're dealing with are, in some cases, corporeal entities. When I say corporeal entities, I'm talking about flesh and blood. I'm talking about you pull out your sidearm, you pull out your magnum, and you shoot it in the face and it dies. I'm not talking about some ethereal being that can walk through walls. They exist. We're going to get to that in a second. I'm talking about flesh and blood entities. And by the way, Clint, interrupt me at any time if you want to interject something. But basically, go ahead.
I thought I'd throw in there real quick, since you're on this topic. You know, these people out here, that deny, and there is still quite a few out there, but most of the general part are starting to see that this is real. And, the Bible made the simple quotation that God had made man and jinn. And most people don't even, I have not heard, but maybe one other person in like the last few years use that reference anywheres. And I think that's pretty important, because most people don't even go in depth to see what jinn is.
I agree. This is why there's so much confusion, Clint. And there's a good reason for confusion. The confusion, in many cases, even for people who are researching this topic, and by topic I mean UFOs and non-human entities, okay? That very broad topic. People who are researching some subset of that topic are getting very confused, even the ufologists who spend their whole lives trying to understand this. Why? There's a lot of reasons, but one of the most confusing situations enveloped in this whole thing is that there are just so many different kinds of things, of entities out there, that it's hard to delineate between them and to try and figure out who's pulling the strings and where, who's flying what, who's working with the different governments. So it becomes very convoluted, and there's a reason for that. It's very simple. I mean, I'm probably going to complicate it more than it needs to be, but I'm going to try and break this down as precisely as possible. And I didn't intend to get into this, but I feel like this is where I need to go. Listen, This is my postulate. I think it's more than a postulate. I think it's more than a theory. I think it's borne out in Scripture. I think it's borne out again in the book of Enoch, in the book of Giants, and also by the work of many, many men such as Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, and many others who've done work on this subject, is the idea that all of this is based in, actually I shouldn't say all of it, I should say most of this has its roots in Genesis 6. A lot of people can understand that. That's good. A lot of people can start there. Some people can't. Those people who can't understand, those people who cannot accept Genesis 6 might as well turn this broadcast off. Because let me tell you something, you're way behind if you can't get Genesis 6. You have to get it, and you have to get it now. Genesis 6 is the Rosetta Stone, as Steve Quayle often says. Genesis 6 is the Rosetta Stone to understanding so much of what's happening right now. It's not the end all to understanding. Really, the whole context of the Scriptures, and especially the gospel of Jesus Christ, is the end all to understanding what's going on a very broad scale. But Genesis 6 is a Rosetta Stone to discerning, to understanding what's going on. But you can't stop at Genesis 6. I think it also takes one to factor in the pre-Adamic world to pin some of this down. However, let's just start with Genesis 6. Let's start with the Bible school understanding. And even for those who aren't believers who might be listening to this broadcast, this is a pretty much general understanding that the majority of the populace of the human race currently has, except for hardcore atheists who are just ignorant idiots, who are willfully blind, ignorant idiots. So what I'm referring to is the existence of what people call archons. They call them archons or angels, whatever. Basically, they are superior beings that are of a higher order than mankind. And the Bible confirms this. The Bible says that we, the human race, were created a little lower than the angels. So the Bible confirms this. There are beings above us in the hierarchy, and that definitely refers to, that hierarchy definitely has a bearing on capabilities. Understand that. We're talking about capabilities. Although I believe Adam, the father of our race, had many more capabilities than we do now. I think that the original human being was indeed very wonderful. However, not so much anymore. We've fallen very far since the Garden of Eden. But there may be certain things latent in the human race, leftovers, things that still remain in our genetics, capabilities that we don't realize are there, which, by the way, can be very dangerous to tap into those, because once you do, you're playing on a new level. You're playing on a new level. Folks, listen to me. If you try and tap into some of that latent stuff through transcendental meditation and all this occultic stuff, you're going to end up getting on a playing field where you can't contend. And what I mean by that is you start to awake to things that you can't deal with. There's other entities on those levels. There's other realities there that literally and frankly will drive you nuts, okay? Because those kind of abilities have to be tempered with wisdom. And anyways, that's a whole other subject. But let me get back to this issue of archons, of angels, all right? I use the word archon and angel interchangeably. Obviously, the word angel is a very generic term. It refers to, it means basically messenger. It refers to not one specific kind, but a grouping, a very broad grouping of entities that are called angels. So angels can come in many shapes and sizes and with different capabilities. The Bible names some of them. The Bible names archangels. The Bible actually does name watchers, not just the book of Enoch, by the way. The Bible, in the book of Daniel, identifies a class of angelic entities called watchers. So there's watchers, there's archangels, there's angels of different hierarchies. They have different responsibilities. They certainly have different capabilities. So those are angels, and again, angels and archons. I'm using those words interchangeably. Some people actually call those ethereals. In other words, these are entities that can basically reconfigure their molecular structure. They can walk through walls. They can disappear. They can morph and make themselves look like human beings or animals or whatever. And we know that that's the case because the Bible tells us that that's the case. The Bible tells us that we could be entertaining angels unawares. So, in other words, angels can look like us. They might look like us anyways, but they can appear to be very human to the degree that we can't tell that they're angels, that they're non-human. So, most people are very familiar with that idea: angels, archons, these ethereal beings. Okay, let's call that the top of the ladder, so to speak. Okay, obviously Jesus, the Son of God, and God the Father are in a different category. They are the Creator. Jesus is the Maker. He's the Creator, so he's not even in a category. So I'm referring to created beings, okay? So we have archons, we have angels, which are the same thing, which are also called ethereals. Those are at the top of the ladder. And I'm going somewhere with this. So people who want to get some understanding, and I'm not boasting, I'm just telling you, I'm going to give you a biblical paradigm that most people don't think about. This will unlock, for a lot of people who've been doing research on these subjects, on ufology and on demonology and all this kind of thing. This is going to give you a key. This is going to allow you to unlock certain things that have been elusive, certain understandings that have been elusive to you, because most people don't think in these terms, okay? So at the top of this, imagine a ladder of a hierarchy. At the top of this ladder of hierarchy are angels, in terms of created beings, the very general category of angels. Okay, we're just going to deal with general categories. Now, something very unique happened on this planet. It is Genesis 6. It happened in the antediluvian world. Obviously, as we referenced before, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful. They came down. They violated the law of God. They made a pact between each other. There were 200 of them. They purposely plotted to violate the law of God. They made a pact. They came down. They knew there would be consequences. They chose to do it. Why did they do it? Very simple. Lust and the desire to have children. That's what the Bible tells us, and that's what the book of Enoch tells us. It's very simple. They lusted after the women. Whether people can accept that or not, it doesn't matter. It's true. And they wanted to have children. They wanted to progenerate children. So they came down in the days of Jared. They infiltrated our reality, our scope, our dimension, however you want to call it. They left their estate and they came down. They left the original estate and they came down into our reality, and they did something very insubordinate. They took for themselves wives, and they had children, and these children were giants, and they took animals, like we said, and they created through copulation with these animals, and possibly also all kinds of genetic stuff, genetic experimentation, and what we might call technology. They created all kinds of abominations. I call these abominations, these creatures, I call them unsanctioned beings, or alternatively, unsanctioned sentience. In other words, and very simply what I mean is that these were creatures that came into existence outside of the will of God. Now, that doesn't mean that God didn't know it was going to happen. I'm referring to that it was not God's intention. God did not himself intend for these entities to exist. They came into existence as a result of insubordination. In other words, sin. They came as a result of insubordination. Both the giants of the antediluvian world and the monsters that were created through copulation with animals. And of course I'm referring to the archons copulating with animals. We can infer many things. We can say we can infer that this is where centaurs came from. This is where fawns came from. This is where perhaps dinosaurs came from. Although there's other ideas for that. This is where minotaurs came from, and a host of other creatures that are what we have believed for many years are the stuff of legends. No, it's just the history of this planet. That's really what it is. It's the history of this planet. Now, there are other creatures, obviously, that God himself made, and God declared, for example, that he made Leviathan. So there's other beasts that were made by God that don't fall into this category. But I'm specifically talking right now about the ones that do. So you have the archons, and then you have their progeny. All these hybrids. That's what they are. Hybrids, human hybrids, giants, and hybridized creatures, which in many cases had a human appearance. are at least half human, half something else, such as a centaur. So those are the hybrids. That happened during the Golden Age. We're repeating some of what we talked about earlier, but that happened during the Golden Age, which I call the Empire of the Gods. In other words, that was the time from the days of Jared, when the 200 watchers came down, to the flood, to Noah's flood. That was a period of at least, and this is a conservative estimate, and I know that Stan Deyo and some other people have conferred and confirmed this, at least 1,000 years. All right? Understand, 1,000 years. 1,000 years transpired between when these archons came down and began to mess with the genetics of life on the planet to when the flood was. I think Stan Dale puts it at 2,000 plus years, but definitely at least 1,000 years. And it's interesting that the accomplishment of many empires, or the desired accomplishment, is to last for 1,000 years. That was certainly the desire of the Roman Empire. They wanted to last 1,000 years. It was a very prevalent theme that they would build an empire that lasts 1,000 years, and it was definitely part of one of Hitler's aspirations for the Third Reich, that it would last for 1,000 years, and he actually made that statement on many occasions. And it is a direct reference to this 1,000-year reign of the Golden Age. It wasn't very golden for the servants of God. It wasn't very golden for Adam and his descendants that were still loyal and subordinate to the King of Heaven. But it was a time of high technology. It was a time of mythical beasts, but they were real. They weren't the stuff of legends. They were the stuff of history. They were real. They existed. High technology. We're talking about massive edifices. We're talking about flying machines. We're talking about monsters of epic proportions existed during this period of time, which some call the Golden Age. I prefer to call Empire of the Gods, because the gods were here, the archons, and of course they were worshipped as gods. But by the way, they ruled from behind the thrones of their children. That's going to give you a piece of the puzzle of why they wanted to have children. And they loved their children very, very much. The book of Enoch tells us that they wept bitterly when God would not allow their children to have eternal life. So basically, that's in a nutshell the Golden Age. So that is what happened after the archons came down. Now, here's what we have to deal with, okay? Here's what we have to deal with. We know that according to Genesis 6, that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and afterwards, referring to after the flood. We know that the genetic line continued, but in an inferior fashion. In other words, it was the genetics of the post-flood giants and creatures were of inferior stock, because the book of Enoch tells us that these giants were very, very large, unbelievably large, 200 feet in some cases, very, very large. And the monsters and the entities that were pre-flood, again, could be referring to dinosaurs. Post-flood, these things were more diminutive. And there's a reason for that. There's a geological reason for that, by the way. Many of you listening have done the research into that, about the oxygen levels on the earth were different. There was more oxygen. The atmosphere was different. It allowed creatures to grow larger. And not only that, the earth was smaller. The earth expanded during the flood. Stan Dale proves that. I think he does a fantastic job. The earth expanded during the flood. And so the atmosphere, the biosphere changed. And so the creatures changed along with the biosphere. Most of them were destroyed. Now I'm saying most of them were destroyed. Not all of them were destroyed. Why? And this may come as a shock to some people, or it may be very difficult to believe. But I believe, it's my opinion, that some of them went off world and they escaped the flood, and some of them went under the earth, although many of them probably died as well, because the flood waters actually came, the Bible says they came down in rain, but they also came up from the earth. So they exploded through the surface of the earth, probably creating the plate tectonics, probably dividing the continents, and expanding the volume of the earth. So that's that portion. Clint, if you want to interject with something here or any questions, because I'm going to go to the next part.
Absolutely. And, the signs are there, and more than the signs, the proof is in the pudding, as I always put it. You know, you look at even some of the parts of our historical documentation and pictures. There's always these bizarre pictures in our historical references, whether it be from one point of the earth to another. You see these bizarre images, and it'll either be somebody standing or it'll be a picture of a city or something, but there's always some bizarre object in the sky. Some of these objects, that there's numerous paintings out there, and there's just too many to really keep track of them. But one thing is evident, that they were, they had more advanced technology then than what we currently have, but we are fixing to see. And, like you had put in reference earlier, there's a lot of this stuff that's underground and being kept under cover that many of us know about, probably even me. I mean, we already know that they have the Stargate technology and the teleportation of objects, if you would, by the breaking and splitting of their matter, if you would. I'm not sure how you would put that in a scientific term.
The molecular structure.
Yeah, there you go. And, it's really, really miraculous, but yet so horrific at the same time to see all this playing out. And I say that because it's miraculous to people like me and you that already know what this is about and where it's going. But it's horrific having to watch those around you be a victim of not only the control, but a victim of the manipulation, the genetic altercation, the enslavement of not only the mind, but the spirit. And by, you got into the topic earlier about the genetic manipulation. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because we got Jason, the co-host, he's on now, and we also have Sheila Zielinski, who is listening in right now. This genetic process here, the importance to me is, if you are altered genetically, you read the Bible good enough and it tells you that keeps you from going to heaven. If you allow yourself, if you say, well, I'd rather live, so I'm going to take whatever it is so I can keep on living, and then not realizing that it's going to alter your genetic structure, and change who you are, or even if it doesn't change you as a whole, it'll alter you in a way just enough to make you something other than man. But right. When you got on the topic of UFOs, that's a whole subject I would definitely like to get on a interview with you. And another thing, in the super soldier, I know there's a lot of people out there that don't even comprehend in the direction of the super soldier technology that they have out there and what it's being used for. But I'll let you get on in your next direction. I knew you was headed somewhere with that, and I'd like to hear it. It's got me very intrigued.
Yeah, if Jason or Sheila wants to interject anything, certainly, before I move on.
Yeah, Jason, are you nearby?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I've been having problems with my phone, and I apologize. I was on Tim's show earlier, and hi, Tim. It's great to have you back on again.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say real quick, Clint, I share exactly what you just said. We're seeing the movement of transhumanism going forward, talking about man and machine, but also we have companies out there like Monsanto right now who are working on a vaccine, and we see people like Bill Gates through Dave Hodges' articles that are funding these organizations for these types of vaccines, and lo and behold, pretty soon they're going to be mandatory, and people are going to be put in a position where they're going to have to choose either A, get shot or go off to a concentration camp, or B, get the shot and move on. And I really don't think that they're going to understand what it does to their genetic structure.
No, they won't.
And it's going to alter them to the point, just to that point of being beyond human, where they're not covered under the blood of Christ anymore. There's no redemption for them. They'll fall right into the realm, basically, of what the fallen angels are. And
that's right.
And in that, then Satan wins automatically against them anyways. He won't ever win against God, but against the individual that accepts that, definitely. And we should all know that the government out there, they tell half-truths, and they'll say it saves you and you can go and buy and sell whatever you want, but at the end of the day, they're probably not going to tell you that. All they're going to say it's going to cure you. They're not going to tell you that it's going to genetically alter you.
That's right.
Exactly. We actually talked about that maybe 15 minutes ago, and I kind of put it out there real quick while he was on that topic about, it's okay to a certain point to want, we all value having freedom. We all value having peace and love. But one thing in factor here is everybody has seemed to have let themselves be misguided. And, they keep following these leaders, these proclaimed leaders. The Bible even told us would come, and that they would, basically in short term, rule over man. And what you have here in every nation of the world is a group of men, or even women in some cases. And like you had said, Tim, a lot of these people, I question whether or not they are even fully human, because the things that they do, the things that they say, and the way they act on those sets, there's something eerie about it. There really is. I mean, from a standpoint from somebody like us, and we see the world for what it really is. It's good versus evil. And when we see these leaders come on stage, and you see all of our brothers and sisters of the earth cheering them on and voting for them to put them on that elect seat, this is pretty sickening from our standpoint, because we're seeing a bunch of people follow a false hope. And it's beyond my comprehension on how people have allowed themselves to be so misled. And I always often say this term: those of men who call themselves leaders have yet learnt to follow. And that should speak 1,000 words, not only to myself, but to everyone out there. I mean, they go by another man to guide them and tell them what is right, when God has already foretold them what is right and wrong, and gave them the ability to learn the knowledge that they seek for themselves. Instead, they go and learn it from somebody else. They want to know what they think, and instead they go upon what they think, and it alters their way of life or their way of thought.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that I definitely don't believe that everybody that we see walking around today, both on TV and just in general public, are fully human. I think it's already begun. I think we're talking about hybrids. We're talking about clones. I think this has been the reality of the planet on which we live for probably at least 50 years. Besides the morphing capabilities of angels, of fallen angels, both the messengers of God and of Satan can mask themselves, cloak themselves in many different forms. So in some cases, you may be, as the Bible tells us, as the New Testament tells us, you may be entertaining an angel. So it's not all the bad guys, but those are specific beings that are on assignment from God. They're not just wandering around messing with the affairs of men for either their own initiative or for the devil. These are the angels are on a very specific assignment from God, and that's very important to note. It is very important to understand. And they will always declare, they will always affirm and confirm the gospel of Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter where they say they come from, what they look like, what they can do, or what they do for you. If they say anything contrary to the gospel of Jesus Christ, then they are malevolent. They're wicked, for sure. Nothing else matters at that point. And that's how you test the spirits, by the way. Paul defines the gospel for us. Paul says that the gospel of Jesus Christ is the death on the cross, which the early church referred to as the event. The death on the cross, that he died, that he was buried, and that on the third day he rose again and he ascended into heaven. That's the gospel as Paul laid it out. And that is a truth that the kingdoms of darkness will never confess. So for those people wondering, how do you tell the difference between an angel and a fallen angel? Because people do have encounters with angels, real angels, messengers of God. They will confirm the gospel of Jesus Christ, period. They will. And that's something that's discernment 101, by the way. But so many people have just written off, so many people have such a humanistic paradigm, they've written off the reality of any other kind of entity, even angels. They may believe in them in a very Sunday school minded way, with a Sunday school paradigm, like there's some chubby little baby-looking, infant-looking things with wings flying around with harps, but they don't put it in. They don't factor it into reality. They don't factor it into the day-to-day paradigm of their life, which is dangerous, by the way. And referring to people being ignorant, like you were talking about, and going and taking vaccines, even when these things could be changing their genetics. Steve Quayle has a term for that, and I love it because it's true. It's unfortunately true. He calls it dumb unto death, and that's true. You can be dumb unto death, and you can be dumb unto the second death. Understand what I just said. You can be dumb unto the second death. I'm talking about eternally. My people perish for a lack of wisdom, for a lack of knowledge. Some versions say, my people perish. They don't have their eyes open because they're not looking. We're supposed to be looking. We're supposed to be watching, both primarily for the coming of our Lord Jesus, primarily, but also watching the affairs of the earth, being wise as serpents, cunning, but harmless as doves. We need to be living with our eyes open. In fact, if you're a believer, you have to be living with your eyes open. You cannot be ignorant. You cannot be ignorant. So I'd like to break down the second part here. I talked about the archons and the Genesis 6 scenario, and I want to go post-flood, okay? And this is where some things are going to be unlocked for some people, because this really unlocked my mind when I got it. Besides, obviously, angels and fallen angels, you have all of the hybrid mess that the fallen angels created, that the Watchers created and continue to create. You have multitudes of creatures, sentient beings. Again, when I say sentient, I'm referring to conscious beings that are self-aware, that are very much like us in the sense that they can ask the question, what am I, who am I, what is the universe, why am I here? Okay? That's what I mean. I call these entities, they're hybrids, okay? I call them, this is kind of a unnecessarily complicated term, but it's what came to mind when I was drawing this out. It's quasi-ethereals, okay? The term ethereal means air-like. It means supernatural. It means breathy. It's like a ghost, okay? So when I say ghost, when I say ethereal, I'm talking about ghost-like, wraith-like. I call them quasi-ethereals or hybrids. Quasi-ethereals because they don't have the full capacity of their fathers down the genetic line, the fallen angels. They only have some, let's just call them genetic markers for sake of argument. They only have some of the genetic markers of their fathers. And the genetic markers, to the degree that they have the genetic markers of the Watchers, of the archons, of the fallen angels, that's the degree of their dimensional capabilities. Okay, let me explain. In other words, we're talking about entities such as fairies, mermaids, Bigfoot, creatures that are physical and not physical at the same time. Creatures that can move in and out of different dimensions. Creatures that, if they appear physically, you could punch it in the face, but it could then disappear and it would be like a wraith, okay? Those entities exist. They exist. They're all over the place. They exist. These are the common creatures of mythology that are most often called demons. By the way, are they demons? Yes. Yes, they're demonic. They're demons. Okay? Are they fallen angels? No. They are the hybrid offspring. And they're far enough down the line here, post-flood. These are entities, like I said, that vary in capabilities. Understand there's a multitude of entities on the earth, sentient entities that are not human, and they vary in their capabilities, depending on how much of the genetics of the angels they have. And they're mixed with different things. Also, some of them are hybrids from angels and from the Watchers and monkeys or gorillas, probably the Bigfoots. Okay, some of them are hybrids from angels and other creatures. Some of them are variations of giants, or the offspring of giants, or the offspring of centaurs, or the offspring of, I mean, it's endless. That's why it's so convoluted. That's why it's so confusing, because there are multitudes. There are multitudes. And the reason why it's important to understand it is because guess what? They're going to start showing up pretty soon. They're going to start showing up. So anyways, they have been for many a millennium, but they're going to start showing up, they're going to start coming back like gangbusters pretty soon. So you have these entities like Bigfoot, mermaid, fairies. That's why they're quasi-ethereal. They have some of the genetic markers, therefore some of the capabilities of their progenitors. They are unsanctioned beings. They were not intended to be by God. They came as a result of insubordination. Therefore, they are unequivocally evil. Unequivocally evil. And they are unequivocally irredeemable. Understand, unequivocally evil, unequivocally irredeemable. And those two things make them despise the human race. For whom the Son of the living God came to this planet, became like us, and died for us. I'm sorry, there's a train in the background here. It's drowning me out a little bit. So understand, that's part of the reason why they absolutely despise us. They're unequivocally evil. They're unequivocally irredeemable. And you hit it right on the mark, Jason. If we become something less than human, guess what? We are now on their playing field. Not just their playing field, we now have their condition. Irredeemable, unequivocally irredeemable. So that category right there should clarify for a lot of people why there are so many bizarre creatures out there that can appear and disappear and materialize and dematerialize, and some of them can walk through walls at certain points in time, and some of them are affected by magnetic fields and so forth and so on. It's because they have the genetic markers of the progenitors, the fallen angels, and as I said, to the degree that they have those genetic markers, that's the degree that they'll be able to operate in the capabilities of the fallen angels, which is, one of the capabilities is obviously to be multidimensional and to be able to move around the earth very quickly, maybe instantaneously, okay? So and by the way, in that category of hybrids, quasi-ethereals, which are around today, by the way, we're not just talking pre-flood, we're talking post-flood now. Many of them are living below the earth. Many of them are flying around in saucers because they have technology. Why do they have technology? Because in many cases, probably in most, these entities, these quasi-ethereals, these hybrids, are far smarter than we are, far more intelligent than we are. They have technology. They've developed it for centuries. They have the knowledge that's been passed down by their fathers, the Watchers, and the giants and the different entities that were using this kind of technology. They preserved it. Where are they? People say, well, where are they? Most of them are within the earth. They're within the earth, okay? The earth is like a big piece of Swiss cheese, all right? There are many, many caverns. I believe there are civilizations below the surface of this planet. Again, fallen, unequivocally irredeemable, unequivocally malevolent, all right, living under the surface of the earth. And again, people would say, so many ufologists ask this question, well, if that's the case, and if there's aliens and superior beings, why don't they just take us over? What are they waiting for? Well, let me tell you very simply what we said in the beginning. They don't have the dominion. And who enforces that law? God the Father. And nobody can go against God. Nobody can fight with God and win. Nobody. If God's enforcing, it's God who enforces humanity's authority. God. And of course, probably the multitude of angels. Greater are those who are with us than those who are against us. There may be multitudes of these malevolent entities, but there are also many more multitudes of entities that are subordinate to God, and angels and whatever. So what I'm saying then is we're talking about the second category, hybrids, what I call quasi-ethereals. They have some of the genetic markers of their fathers. To the degree that they have those genetic markers, that's the degree that they have the capabilities of their progenitors, their primary progenitors, the watchers, the fallen angels. By the way, there's a subcategory here, which I didn't get to. It actually belongs in the antediluvian part of this ladder, part of this hierarchy. They're called disembodied spirits. These guys, Jesus calls unclean spirits, and so does the book of Enoch, by the way. These guys are a whole bracket unto themselves. God pronounces a judgment over them. They were the giants, the spirits of the giants, the spirits of the progeny of the watchers in the antediluvian world. When they died, they were confined to wander. They were cursed to wander the earth bodiless, but yet having all the lusts of the body, hungry, thirsty, everything. A sexual drive, imagine that, being hungry, thirsty, having a sexual drive, but not having a body with which to fulfill those lusts. All right, that's why they're called unclean spirits. That's why they inhabit people. Those are the possessing demons. They habit people. They're not really demons; they're unclean spirits. Those are the possessing spirits that inhabit people. And if you've ever encountered somebody who's demonized, someone who has a demonic spirit, who has an indwelling demonic spirit, let me tell you, these entities, they take the body, they take it over, and a multitude of them, a legion of them can be in a person at a time. They inhabit the person, and people say, well, what are the physics behind that? I don't know, but there is a physics there that causes this to happen, where they can inhabit a person. They're inhabiting the body along with the soul of the person to whom the body belongs. Imagine being trapped in your own body with all these demonic entities occupying your home, so to speak, and you can't kick them out. It's a horrible thing. And people who are playing with the occult, they don't have any idea what they're getting themselves into. And so these unclean spirits, when they take a body over, if you've ever encountered a demonically charged, no, not charged, I'm sorry, a demonically infested person, they take the body and they often do very, well, how can I say this? They're very gluttonous. They're very sexual. They'll take the body and they'll do sexual things with it. They'll both do things that satisfy their pleasure, because through that body they can experience food. Through that body they can experience drink. Through that body they can experience sexual pleasure. But also they hate that body. They hate you as the human. So they're using your body, but they hate you at the same time. It's kind of like these self-absorbed, what do you call them, narcissists who go and pay a prostitute and they abuse the prostitute. It's because they want the pleasure, but they also get pleasure out of abusing that prostitute. Well, that's how you have to look at these entities. They get pleasure out of the bodies, these unclean spirits, but then they also abuse the bodies. They're very abusive to the bodies. Sometimes they'll mutilate the genitals and they'll do all kinds of stuff. I've seen it, okay? These are the unclean spirits. These are the unclean spirits. These are the ones that God pronounced a judgment on in the days of Noah, and he said, you're going to wander the earth bodiless, but you're going to hunger, you're going to thirst, but you're not going to be able to fulfill the lust of your flesh. Paraphrasing. And by the way, he said, until the day of judgment, until the day of judgment, when the Son of Man returns, that's the demarcation. That's when, so they know that when the Son of Man returns to the earth, the game is over. Their time is over. And by the way, it also said in the book of Enoch that they're going to be able to be free. They're going to be loosed. They're going to be free to do these things. that God's not going to restrain them. Obviously, as believers, we have the authority to deal with those things, but they're free to do it until the day of judgment. That's why when Jesus showed up on the scene, and these unclean spirits on a couple of occasions ran up to, they didn't run away from him, they ran up to him because they knew who he was. And what did they do? They cried out, "We know who you are. You are the Son of God. Why have you come to torment us before the appointed time?" There is an appointed time for them. They are the unclean spirits, the spirits of the giants. Just like the book of Enoch says, they have an appointed time, and they know that when the Son of Man appears, when Jesus Christ appears on the earth, they thought that, they didn't know about the first coming. They were thinking at the end of the age that their time is up. Jesus didn't come to establish his kingdom the first time. He came to pay for our sins and to rectify our condition. But they didn't know that. And so they're saying, it's not time yet. What are you doing here? Why have you come to torment us? It's not time. That proves conclusively that those entities are the very same that the book of Enoch describes, and that the book of Enoch delineates. Those are the same entities, okay? That's a whole other bracket of entities. That's what I'm telling you. There's so much stuff. There's a whole other, that's a whole bracket separate to itself. They're called disembodied spirits. Understand, they are not demons. They are not fallen angels. They are disembodied spirits, a whole separate category relating specifically to the antediluvian world and the giants that existed. So you have these quasi-ethereals, which are further down the ladder. Now I'm going to get to the final point. I'll wrap this up here. The final category. So we talked about the archons, the fallen angels. We talked about the antediluvian world and the direct progeny that they had, all the monsters. And again, the book of Giants literally calls them monsters. These monsters were separate from the giants. There were the giants and there were the monsters, and they associated with each other, by the way, because they had a common father. So, coming down the ladder through the quasi-ethereals, the hybrids that are still around today, the final rung of this ladder, I think, is the most intriguing, and it's probably the most controversial. Because I believe, and this is my opinion, that there exists a class of entities, and again, in this class there are many different kinds, species, that are not the progeny of the fallen angels, that are not the result of Genesis 6, that are not a result of fallen angels copulating with humans or other animals. These are what you might refer to as indigenous to Earth. And what I'm referring to is pre-Adamic. This is my postulation. Everything I just said before this I can prove in the Scriptures. This part is Tim Alberino's postulation, okay? I believe that there exists, and I call this group, by the way, I call them corporeals, because they're physical, they're like us. They don't have the genetics of fallen angels. They have to rely on technology to move between dimensions and so forth. These are indigenous Earth entities that I believe originate from the pre-Adamic world. In other words, they escaped the first destruction of the Earth. For those who understand what the pre-Adamic world means, it was a time before Adam, when something was going on the earth before God created the human race, and there was a judgment similar to the flood that eradicated them and their empire. Some people believe that the devil literally had an empire on the earth. There's a lot of speculation. We have to speculate because there isn't much information that we can draw upon. Not biblical, anyways. There's some things. There are definitely some things, but I'm not going to go into those right now. So, you have what I call corporeals. These entities, flesh and blood. These guys can't walk through walls without the aid of technology. They can't disappear like the quasi-ethereals. They don't have those capabilities, and if they have them innately. In other words, they were created to be that way. But again, let me reiterate, they are unequivocally malicious. They're unequivocally evil. They're unequivocally irredeemable. They are in a state of insubordination to God the Father. They are the enemies of God, and therefore they're our enemies. So these entities, these corporeals, I believe that these are some of the reptilian races that you hear people talking about, because these reptilian civilizations are fabled to have existed for many an epoch. These guys have civilizations under the earth, not just the reptilians, by the way. The Indians, I think, called them the Nagas. Everybody's got different names from different civilizations, but there's so much evidence that there is a reptilian indigenous race living beneath the earth. By the way, these entities are not all in league with each other. It's just like not all of the human race is in league with each other. They're all fallen, but they fight with each other. But I can guarantee you can be assured that they are all subjected to the devil on some level, because he is the ruler, he is the prince of the earth. They are subjected to him on some level, but they may not play nice with each other, okay? There is another piece of the puzzle. That's why it's so convoluted. They're all evil, but they don't necessarily play nice with each other. That is the nature of the kingdom of darkness. It is the nature of the kingdom of darkness, strife and jealousy and striving with one another. It is the nature of the kingdom of darkness. It's the nature of those who are insubordinate against God. So, I mean, the kingdom of God is righteousness and peace and love and joy. The kingdom of the devil, the kingdom of darkness, is the polar opposite of those things, literally. Literally, these entities are the polar opposite of those things. They contend with each other. They fight with each other. There's different factions. Different factions are working with different groups. Some of the quasi-ethereals are not really involved in any conspiracy directly, but they are malevolent and they hate human beings generally. Some of these entities are involved directly in a conspiracy. Many of these entities are using technology and have high technology. They're zipping around in our atmosphere. They're contacting some of the members of our governments. They're helping us reverse engineer some things. It is all ultimately heading for a diabolical plan that has been hatched at the very top, meaning Satan, meaning Lucifer. Hatched at the very top. Understand that, we have thousands of years as the human race since the Garden of Eden. In other words, we've been around, our species, since the Garden of Eden. So the devil, Satan, has had at least that much time to plot, to plan, to design what is unfolding right now. Let that sink in. He has had all this time to come up with this grand conspiracy that may very well be coming to a final head, a finale, in the days in which we live, involving all of the things that I've mentioned, all of these insubordinate enemies of God. I want you to remember, and I want to pull it up here, so if somebody wants to interject right now, I'm pulling up a Bible verse, so somebody go ahead.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, Clint.
I ain't heard anybody sum it up the way you have in this last hour and a half to 2 hours here. This is something that needs to be on every broadcast. This is something that needs to be on every headline. This needs to be on every bulletin, every poster. Everything should have this kind of information, because I don't see any other information out there that is this crucial. I mean, yeah, you've got these deadly viruses and these things of people being slaughtered and killed all over the world. But all these things, as horrible as they are, the more that you stand back and look at the good versus evil, you see what it's being carried out for and why. And a lot of it has to do with keeping us focused on that kind of thing, so that we don't put the pieces of the puzzle together for ourselves and be able to connect with where it's headed. People are always wondering, well, I don't know what to make of all this. We see all this stuff happening. I don't know whether to believe that the government is good or bad, and I hear it almost on a daily basis. I really do. And it just disheartens me so much. I mean, I said this, I don't know how many times, but to carry the sorrow of the people of the world on your consciousness, in your heart, to carry that sorrow of the other people, the only thing that keeps you going, I think, is undoubtedly the Lord himself, because the only way you can build strength with that kind of sorrow is by just pouring that sorrow to him. And, he'll take it from you. in exchange, he'll give you a better sight or a better opening view of what's either coming or what he wants you to approach and what he wants you to do in your point in lifetime. And I think what you've brought to the table so far tonight is devastating. It is absolutely crucial that everybody out there, even the listening audience, to apply this kind of knowledge to yourselves and to your families, to your loved ones. Get them informed. Let them know that all this stuff going on in the world is not necessarily the type of thing that you need to be focusing on. But here in about 10 minutes, we're going to take a break. I'll just let you kind of fill in there. I know you just wanted to say something too, Jason.
No, well, yeah, I was just going to say real quick, one thing, because I've been listening to Rick Wiles quite a bit over the past, 2 years, and with what's been said, because I know Tim had mentioned about, God's hand, being the ultimate protection. Once he takes that away, I mean, it's going to erupt like there's no tomorrow. I mean, he's the only one holding back the flood of evil that wants to move in not only on this country but over the whole entire world. And I really think too that these blood moons that are fixing to still come up and that have already passed, some of them have, I really think that those are all warnings from God, warning people to come back to him and to start repenting, because if they don't, I think, and this is Jason's opinion, okay? This isn't something I read anywhere, it's just Jason's opinion, is I really think that last blood moon, I think it's scheduled for the 28th of September of 2015. I think that's the last warning. And if we haven't as a nation repented by then, I really think God is going to lift his hand off of this nation and probably off of the rest of the world, and we're going to see things just go. I really think that the evil is going to flood in. And one thing I had a question about, though, I've heard Steve mention it before about this stuff actually manifesting in the physical. And is that what you see fixing to happen?
Brother, a lot of it's already in the physical. It's just beneath our feet.
Oh, okay.
A lot of it's already manifest in the flesh and has been for many years, but it's just beneath our feet. Remember, I talked about dominion. God gave the human race dominion, okay? However, we can abdicate the dominion. It can't be taken from us, but we can abdicate it. That's how the devil controls the nations. If a righteous man rises up and becomes a king or a president or a ruler of a nation, he can guide the country away from the powers of darkness and rule according to the principles and to the law of God. It's all about dominion. But we can abdicate that. In other words, in our country, for example, with the immorality and all of the licentiousness and lust and everything that's going on in our country, we're abdicating to wicked men. We're allowing wicked men to get a hold over us, and we're so far down that path. I don't know that it's irreversible. In fact, I would say it's not at this point. However, when we talk about the human race, our humanity, what people are not realizing, what people are not factoring into their equation of the end times and of the apocalypse and everything, is that we can abdicate our dominion of the planet. We can abdicate it by allowing ourselves to be, quote, upgraded or evolved into something that is not fully human. And therefore, the dominion associated with our humanity is lost. We have abdicated it. To whom? That's the question. What happens when we lose our humanity and something else gains it, becomes human enough to claim it or to contend with us for it? That is a very disturbing thought, but it is coming. It is coming. Let me tell you, this is what the scripture I was looking for. I should have it memorized by now, but It's Psalms 2. Listen to this, Psalm 2. I've read this on the air a bunch of times because it is so crucial. Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together. Against who? Against the Lord, and against His anointed, capital A, Jesus, saying, let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us. This is a question that came to me some years ago that really began to open my mind to all of this. What kind of weapons do you bring to a war with God? Think about it, okay? What kind of weapons do you bring to a war with God? The nations, and this is going to happen. This isn't metaphoric. This isn't a metaphoric. This isn't a poetic. This isn't a poetic phrase. This is going to happen literally. The nations are going to rage. They're going to plot a vain thing. They're going to gather together, and they're going to take counsel against God Almighty and His anointed. That tells you a couple of things. Number one, they're not alone. Number two, they know who God is and who His Anointed One is. They know it. They will know it. They will know who God is. They will know who Jesus is, and they will willfully reject Him. And they're going to have the confidence to go to war with God, not with tanks, not with fighter jets, not with missiles, not with any kind of human armaments. What's going to give them the confidence? The host of entities that are joining and leading them. Entities that are leading them into this battle with high technology and beings that seem so mighty and powerful that not even God Himself could defeat them. Such an army as the earth has never seen before is going to assemble on this planet and make war with God and with the Son of God, the maker of the universe, Jesus Christ, the singularity of life itself. They're going to make war with Him. What is God's reply? He who sits in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall hold them in derision. He shall speak to them in His wrath and distress them in His deep displeasure. And listen to what He says. It gives me chills what His reply is. Yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. God says, I have set my king. You think you're going to take the earth? You think that He's speaking to the devil? You think you're going to enthrone yourself? No. Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, will rule and reign, and there is nothing that anybody can do to stop Him. Nothing. But understand that the nations are going to try, and they're going to try because they're going to war with non-human allies. And these allies are going to give them the confidence, and they themselves at this point may be non-human, maybe hybridized. This is where this is all going. It's not just the Illuminati. It's not just the New World Order. It's Psalms 2. It's Psalms 2 playing out literally on this earth, going to war with God Almighty. Imagine something's going to give them the confidence that they can do it. Something, and not just the humans, by the way. Something's going to give Satan the confidence that he can do it.
We'll go into a quick break real quick right before we hit this third hour. If any of you callers out there or listeners, if you want to hear our next hour's conversation, call this number. You'll only be able to hear it by phone. It's 347-850-8547. That's 347-850-8547. Call in and tune in because we're going to go into this next hour with the detail. We'll be right back, guys. We're just going to take a quick break here and allow us to get a good drink or whatever. And I'll talk to you guys here in just a minute. Alrighty, folks, we are into the third hour. Sorry for that interruption. We just went into the third hour segment, and I figured everybody could use a quick break and breather. Man, this has just been a epic broadcast with Timothy Alberino. And I tell you what, this guy, this is the second time we've had him on our show, and I'm hoping to get him on more often, because I tell you what, it seems like every time that he's been on here, the last time that he was on here, he brought it just as much as he did tonight. And I tell you what, it's just amazing to hear so much profound, not just words of truth, but the actual divine basis in which humanity, the standpoint of humanity is currently at, and where we were rooted upon this earth and why. And out of all these people you hear on radio programs and all these alternate websites and what have you, none of them, they're always focused on modern news and modern deception, if you would. I'll call it modern deception because they're focused on, you know, these events happening overseas with these people getting killed and these beheadings and all this massive slaughter and what have you. Everybody's just too focused on that. And they've been that way for hundreds of years. They've always been focused on something of those people that have an image or are popular or have some type of famous attribute to them because they did something or stood out in a certain way. As positive as some of these things may be, it has actually made man dependent and look forward to seeing these type of things, these influences. They look forward to seeing these things come into their lives, and it happens so much every day that even my fellow friends, my fellow loved ones, they do this on a daily basis, and they don't even acknowledge these influences. There's always something in everyday life that alters their way of thinking, their process of thought. And, you know, it's powerful. It tells you that this has just been a long-term agenda. It might seem long to us, but to those wicked ones, you know, that are hiding below the earth and beyond, this time frame, a few thousand years, is nothing to them. You know, being the fallen angels, this should be 1,000 words. The fallen angels, you know, they came from the heavens and they were cast out of the heavens. The knowledge that they knew in heaven never left them. It is still within them, and that's why they have such the upper hand. That is why that you are unaware to this day of what the story behind the fallen angels was. And, you know, that goes to say that all these influences have led, and forgive me, Father, for saying this, but there is simple-minded Christians. And I don't mean to cause separation. There isn't separation there. But there's people that think, well, if the Bible doesn't say it, then it isn't true. Woe to that. I really strongly advise people out there that might have that intention. You know, the Bible is nothing but the truth. But also, you need to have a personal connection with God. You need to have a personal connection with the Lord, because that connection will teach you everything in between that the Bible does not. It will bring forth to you the voice of the Lord without ever hearing it with your ear. The things that He shows you, the moment that you connect spiritually with the basis of why you exist and why you are here, that is the moment where He will bring forth the actual physical manifestations upon your daily life that will guide you to where you need to go, what you need to think, and what you need to be focused on. And I think that right there is a strong example of what is actually driving, the words that this guy has spoke in these broadcasts, and even when he was on the Hagman, it's just nonstop. I mean, firmness, and it's like, wow, this guy, he's bringing it out on the table very quickly, but he's saying it with a lot of power in behind it, and it's because he knows. It isn't something that he read out of a textbook. It isn't something that so-and-so had told him. No, it was the observation, in which was a God-given ability to man, observation being the greatest teacher, other than the Lord himself. That is what allowed Timothy to possess the in-depth knowledge in which he has. It's the roots of which God gave us the ability to learn for ourselves, to adapt and observe. And the 90% of humanity has become dependent on their neighbors, their friends, the people above them and beside them to make the decisions for them, rather than to realize that they already have the ability to figure those things out for themselves. And that's what makes people, when you hear people like Tim speak, that's what makes them speak with so much immense power. It's not that they have just did a bunch of research. No. It's because they are connected spiritually. And once this happens, it's hard to describe. I'm not sure how to put it in words. But it is at which point that you actually see the world and yourself for what it truly is, without any influence of another man telling you what it is. And that's something that you will only share yourself between God, not anybody else.
That's right. That's right. That leads me into my favorite subject, my favorite subject, the subject that makes me burn on the inside. It is Jesus Christ. Who is this man? Who is he? Because the second half of Psalms 2, I read the first half. I'll read it all through again because it is so crucial to everything we've talked about. It is crucial to everything that there is. This is the kind of information that supersedes every other thing that you can know. There is no knowledge greater than the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Nothing. Doesn't matter what the entities, what all these advanced entities with all this advanced technology are showing people, or these fallen angels are teaching the people in the occult, these Illuminati members, these occult members who believe that they have all this wonderful knowledge. It is nothing. It is nothing. A writer of the New Testament calls it excrement. Excrement. That's what it is in comparison to the knowledge of Jesus Christ, to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And that's not just some churchly thing to say. That's not just some Christian thing to say. It is the absolute fact. It is the truth. It is the absolute truth. All the angels in heaven know it. All the demons in hell know it to be so. I'm going to read it again. Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and his anointed, saying, let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall hold them in derision. Then he shall speak to them in his wrath and distress them in his deep displeasure. Yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. And then he says, I will declare the decree. The Lord has said to me, this is Jesus speaking, this is the Son of God speaking, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Remember, this is in relationship to the beginning of this verse, the nations gathering together against God, saying, let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us, being led by Satan and the Antichrist. And what does God say? I've given you my son. I've given you Jesus. I've given you the nations as your inheritance. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore be wise, O kings. Be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are those who put their trust in him. Blessed are those who put their trust in him. Jesus Christ is the only hope, is the only rectification for the human race. There is nothing else. He is the blueprint. Understand, he is the blueprint. Jesus is the expressed image of God the Father. The Son of God is the expressed image of the Father. We, our race, us, human beings, were made in the image and the likeness of God, i.e., Jesus, his Son. Jesus is the blueprint. He's our blueprint. That's why he is the second Adam. He resets the blueprint in himself. He's bringing us back. He restores the human race of those who trust in him, those who look to his cross, those who look to his blood for the rectification of their condition, a condition that we identified in the beginning, specifically sin and death. Those who look to the Lord to rectify this condition that we all have, every one of us, sin and death, will be restored to what Adam was made to be and even greater, because we will partake. He is the body. We partake of the body of Christ. He is the head. We are the members. He prayed to the Father that we would be one, just as he and the Father are one, that we are part of his body, that we would be one with him. And so that is the rectification in the cross of Jesus Christ. There is a second resurrection. For those who believe in the Lord Jesus, they will be restored to the blueprint. They will become something greater than Adam was. And those who do not, those who die in their sins, those who die in their condition, will suffer the second death. It is unspeakable, the second death, a terror beyond description. A terror and a horror beyond the ability of the human tongue to describe. We are talking about two polar opposite situations. Those who die in their sin, in their insubordination, and in their condition of death, rejecting the rectification of Jesus Christ, his blood on the cross, will go to be where those 200 watchers are presently residing, and all of humanity that has rejected the Son of God. Because it's all about the Son of God. Everything revolves around Jesus. Everything. I find it interesting that all these so-called great scientific minds and astrologers and all these men who study the stars and the heavens and who have all these philosophical questions, they ask, what's it all for? What's the meaning of it all? Carl Sagan and a lot. And what's his name? The guy in the wheelchair with the glasses. What's his name? Hawkins has a very famous statement where he said, "I want to know why the universe exists, why there is something instead of nothing. I have the answer. I have the answer. The Bible declares the answer. Why is there something instead of nothing? It's not some ambiguous answer. It's not some answer that takes 20,000 pages to describe. It's one name, and his name is Jesus. That's why the universe exists." My favorite scripture in the Bible is 1 Colossians verse 9 through 23. I'm going to read it. 1 Colossians verse 9 through 23. Listen to this, because many people have read these scriptures, but the reality that's being expressed in these scriptures to the Colossians hasn't really sunk in with many people. When it hit me like a ton of bricks. It literally floored me. And I had one of the greatest revelations of my life. I'm going to read it. "For this reason, we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you," speaking to the Colossians, "and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding, that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him, being fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all might according to his glorious power, for all patience and long-suffering with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us." Listen, "giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of His love, of Jesus, the Son of His love, the Son of God, the Son of Man, in whom we have redemption through His blood and forgiveness of sins. Now listen to this. Listen to this. He, Jesus, the Son of God, the Son of Man, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by Him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through Him and for Him. And He is before all things, and in Him all things consist. He is before all things, and in Him all things consist. And He is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things He may have preeminence. Now, understand this. The scientific community, the atheistic scientific community, they have come up with this concoction, this ridiculous, absurd postulation called the Big Bang. They believe in the ignorance and in the darkness of their minds that the universe came into being because an infinitely small particle of matter exploded and created an unbelievable amount of energy in space and matter. Obviously absurd. They call this the initial singularity. They're only right with the terminology because there was an initial singularity. His name is Jesus. Jesus Christ is the singularity. He is the Big Bang. Everything was not just created by God the Father, it was created through Jesus, by Jesus, through Jesus, and here's the important one, for Jesus. I've heard the expression, why are there beautiful flowers at the bottom of the ocean? Why is there an unseen creation at the bottom of the ocean? Why did God do that if we can't see it? And what is the common answer that people give? I think it's erroneous. I think it's missing the mark. The answer is because God loves beauty. That's the answer that I hear floating around out there. Is it true? Sure, but is it really hitting the crux of the issue? Is it really answering the question to the best degree? No. The answer to the question of why there's beauty in unseen places and why the cosmos are so incredibly large, why the universe is so unfathomably large and amazing and beautiful. Why if the human race can't see it? Because it wasn't made for you and it wasn't made for me. It was made for the Son of God. All things were made by Him and through Him and for Him. It pleased the Father to make all things by His Son or with His Son, through His Son, and most importantly, for His Son. Why does the universe exist? Because God the Father loves His Son. That's the answer. God loves His Son. Now imagine you standing before the living God, one of these atheistic scientists who are propagating this absurd lie about the Big Bang, matter basically exploding from nothing. Standing before the Almighty God, having rejected the Son of the living God, having spent your whole life trying to figure out what's this all about, why does the universe exist, why is there Stephen Hawking, why is there something instead of nothing? Imagine standing before God and realizing that you rejected the very reason, the very purpose, the very singularity that you sought. The Son of God, you rejected Him and you denied Him. And there He is, sitting at the right hand of God, His Father, and you rejected Him. There is no greater sorrow. There is no greater despair than the realization that everything exists for Jesus and you chose to deny Him. Even though for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him will not perish, but have everlasting life. Even though God the Father loved us so much that He was willing to give His Son to die, and that Jesus Christ loved the Father so much and He loved us so much that He was willing to come and to fulfill the rectification for our condition, to become the redemption for our condition. We have a condition. Every one of us has a condition. It's called sin and death. It's called sin and death. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Bill Gates with all your billions. You still have the same condition as the pauper living in the gutter. It's called sin and death. And every man will die and be accountable to God. Every man will stand before God. And the only reconciliation, the only hope for that man standing before God is if, hear me, is if there is somebody standing in your place. That is the only hope of rectification, is if somebody is standing in your place. And there's only one man who can stand in your place. Only one man who can rectify the human race, and that is the Son of the living God and the Son of man, Jesus Christ. And to reject him, for those who don't believe in the Lord, for those who reject the gospel of Jesus, to reject Jesus is to reject life itself. There are no cosmos. There is no beauty. There is no peace. There is no joy. There are no beautiful mountains and scenic valleys and sunshines and sunrises and sunsets without Jesus. Specifically, because it was all made for him. All of it. Reject the Son, reject life itself. To reject the Son is to embrace the darkness. To reject Jesus, the source of all life, is to embrace death. Is to embrace death. That's what it means. It's not rejecting a religion. It's not choosing to not believe in this certain worldview or this certain religious philosophical point of view. No. You, sir, to the person who's listening to my voice, scoffing and rejecting the Lord, are rejecting life itself. Jesus Christ is the singularity. That's the answer. That's the answer that Stephen Hawking is looking for. That's the answer that Carl Sagan was looking for. That's the answer that all of these people are looking for through their telescopes and doing their equations. Guess what? The answer is simple, and we have it. It's Jesus, the singularity. That's why that was the revelation. Jesus is the initial singularity. He is the singularity in every sense of the word. He's the singular rectification for the human race. He's the one, the only person that can stand in the gap for the human race, that can rectify us before God the Father, that can restore us to what Adam was meant to be, and even greater, because we become heirs in his kingdom. We become heirs in his kingdom, those of us who love him and those of us who hold fast to him, because the rest of this verse reads, for it pleased the Father, that in him, in Jesus, all the fullness should dwell, and by him to reconcile all things to himself, by him, whether things on earth or things in heaven, having made peace through the blood of his cross. And you, who once were alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now he has reconciled or rectified in the body of his flesh through death, to present you holy and blameless and above reproach in his sight, if indeed you continue in the faith, grounded and steadfast, and are not moved away from the hope of the gospel which you heard, which was preached to every creature under heaven, of which I, Paul, became a minister. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely, brother. Amen to that.
Yes.
It's powerful. And you know what? It boils down to it. It boils down to everything that we see, anything that is peaceful. When you walk outside, either during the day or the night, and you either look at the skies and you see the glorious sunset or the sunrise, or you see the stars, that should be the first thing that comes in mind when people see stuff like that, is the Lord. Sadly, it ain't. And, judgment is coming for that reason. It's one thing to say that we're followers in the Lord, and then to actually say, okay, we're going to follow him, blah, 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 when the Lord said specifically, the only way to follow me is to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And
that's right.
That's very, that's very intimidating to the modern churchgoer. You try to, the information like you have been discussing tonight on most of them, and they will just, they'll utterly reject you. And I don't see why. I do, because our church is no longer church. It's, I don't know what you would call it, but it's beyond anything that I would want to be caught in when the Lord comes back.
It's a form of godliness, but denying the power.
Absolutely. And Sheila, I think you wanted to put in a quick word, or?
Thanks for that, Clint. As Tim was laying out Psalm 2, he said, "Now therefore, O you kings, act wisely, be instructed and warned, O you rulers of the earth." It's interesting because a key phrase here is serve the Lord with reverent awe and worshipful fear. And then it goes on to say, rejoice and be high spirits with trembling, lest you displease him. As Tim was talking, obviously it goes on to talk about those who seek refuge and put their trust in him. That's an important piece, because I think of Psalm 91, under the shadow. How close do you have to be with someone to be under their shadow? Pretty close, huh? This is no time for casual Christianity. And, when I do my show with Hagmans on the weekend on Saturday night, oftentimes we, we'll have different kinds of pastors on, but particularly we really try to show people that in these last days, I wonder how many people in this ubiquitously lukewarm, anything goes, light Christianity, this isn't going to cut it where we're heading. And I think about Elijah in his showdown with the prophets of Baal, and he said, how long will you falter between two opinions? This is a significant admonition, because this applies to us today. Everything Tim was talking about was so incredibly astute, because we cannot have one foot in the world and one foot in the things of God. There are some contingencies of his protection and refuge in the things that are going to come. And how do we know who is a disciple of Christ? Well, that word discipleship should really, ring some bells with people. Jesus is the master, and we are the students, and we're required to adhere to his standard and to follow his commandments. Seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness. Most people don't really, read the part about his right way of doing things. But, I was listening to Joseph Prince this morning. I was just flipping through something to find something else, and I was stunned. He was just going on and on about how grace covers all sins of past and pretty much all the future, and I'm afraid not. Repentance is something that really is an ongoing thing. It's not just, grace, grace, grace abounds. And I think that is a very dangerous theme that's woven into things. Woe to someone that's, preaching any other gospel, and we just have to really think about that. I think that's a really important key point here.
Absolutely. I agree there. And, I support both you and Timothy on this. Tim, you guys are the essence. This is what it's going to take. We are in very small numbers as far as people that really understand the world for what it truly is. And, there's, what is the miracle in this is there is people that are finally, starting to come to the top of the teapot on this, so to speak. But we already know that the hour is final. We know that it's right here on our doorstep. What do you guys, Tim, what do you make of this? What is like the, not what you would call a time frame, but when do you think people are going to start saying, okay, wow, we've been following this for way too long. When's the time we're going to snap out of this?
Unfortunately, I believe that multitudes of people will, to use Steve's phrase again, will be and are dumb unto death. And I don't mean to be harsh with that statement, but listen, I keep repeating this. Okay, I keep repeating this over and over every time I'm on a broadcast. I take the opportunity to say it because it is so important. Before the Lord Jesus comes back to the earth, before that final moment when he comes and he dashes the nations to pieces, and he establishes his kingdom, 1,000-year kingdom, sitting on the throne of David. That's literal. Before that comes to pass, Paul tells us that there are two things that must happen first. Two things. That the man of sin must be revealed, a specific person, that man of sin, when the book of Revelation talks about the book of Daniel and so forth. He must be revealed. Number two, and this is the one that everybody takes that one for granted, okay, whatever, yeah, the Antichrist. But this is the one that people are absolutely lost on. And it rings in my heart like a bell, all right? It's this, that the great falling away will happen. Paraphrasing, the great falling away is going to happen first. So the man of sin is going to be revealed, and the great apostasy is going to occur. And let me tell you something. That word great means great, as in the great tribulation. It's great. Not saying that it's the great tribulation. I'm just referencing to the degree that the tribulation will be great. That's the degree that the falling away will be great. It's not just going to be a reduction in the parishioners or church members. It's going to be a great falling away. Jesus actually says, the likes of which, again paraphrasing, the earth has never before witnessed. There is an apostasy coming, and I'm actually astounded at what I'm hearing out there in the quote-unquote Christian world, Christian television and all this, these different ministers who are basically touting that there is this great, wonderful harvest coming. Is there a great, wonderful harvest coming? There is a wonderful harvest coming, yes. The wheat will be separated from the tares. It is a harvest. But the Lord never said that before the end there will be a great harvest. What he said was before the end there will be a great apostasy and a harvest. In other words, it seems to me, and this is my opinion speaking for myself, that Christians on a very broad scale are being led astray in the very opposite direction. When they ought to be preparing themselves for deception, they're becoming more and more ignorant on a daily basis. And listen, you want to know what the great apostasy is going to revolve around? One of the things it's going to revolve around? I'll tell you. This is, and I'm telling you, this is one of the, it's not the only, but it's one of the primary things this apostasy is going to revolve around. It's going to shock most people. Harvesting souls. What do I mean? I mean that there is coming a movement, even now developing, that is going to attempt to join all of the different denominations of Christianity with Mother Church, with the Vatican, for the quote-unquote harvesting of souls. And many Christian leaders are already taking the bait and are leading their flocks towards the Vatican. It's called ecumenicalism or ecumenism. They're going to link, and mark my words, I'm telling you something that's going to happen because it's already happening. They're going to link hand in hand, arm in arm with the Vatican to harvest souls. It will be a false harvest. It will be false. And people will say, look how many people are coming to the faith. It's already beginning to happen. And they're selling the gospel of Jesus Christ. And this seems like an oxymoron, but this is what it is. They're selling the fundamental, the gospel, the truth of the gospel for the harvesting of souls, what they perceive to be the harvesting of souls. But what's really going to happen is the great apostasy will begin. How do you think those of us who are not willing to link arms with the Vatican or the predecessor, which is going to be the New World Religion, how do you think we're going to be viewed by all these other ignorant Christians? They're going to say, why are you against harvesting souls? Why are you against people coming to Jesus? And are they going to be coming to Jesus? Not according to the gospel. They will be coming to this obscure, ambiguous person named Jesus, but it will not be Jesus as defined by Jesus himself and by his apostles. It will be an alien God, an alien form. And I don't necessarily mean, not even referencing the Antichrist right now. I'm just saying there is a false harvest coming. I see it coming, It's coming like a tidal wave, and it is going to sweep so many people away. So many people away. I see, and I'm not going to name the name. Yes, I will. I'll name it. YWAM. I'll name it, because they're linking up arms already and have linked up arms for many years now with the Vatican, with the Catholic Church, and they're going out and they're harvesting souls, but some of those souls are going into the Catholic Church and are going and they are conducting what's called transubstantiation, participating in transubstantiation, which is a rank heresy, which says that Jesus' body is re-sacrificed over and over and over by the priest who has the magical power to turn that piece of bread into the literal body of Jesus and that wine into the literal blood. Re-sacrificing Jesus over and over and over and over. That is a heresy. It is contrary to Scripture. Jesus Christ died once and for all. Once and for all. There is a union happening. There is an amalgamation happening. All of Christendom, all the different denominations are going to amalgamate, and it's going to happen within the Vatican. It's already happening. And it's going to be for the harvesting of souls. You mark my words, you will begin to see many of these preachers in their churches, they're going to begin to have Catholic priests coming and preaching at their conferences. And people are going to say, are you Catholic bashing? No. I believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I defend the gospel of Jesus Christ. I believe that the Catholic Church is apostate. I believe that it's the woman that rides the beast, the great whore that rides the beast. I believe that, and you know what? That I am not alone. That was the traditional view of the early church. The early church believed the very same. And so this is part of the apostasy that even now is beginning to form. It's beginning to amalgamate right beneath our noses. I'm watching it happen. I have contacts in all these different ministries. I'm familiar with a lot of ministries out there. I know a lot of the leaders of the ministries. I've been watching their ministries, and I've been sickened, because they're all moving towards a unifying faith. And when I say a unifying faith, I mean not a faith that unifies the body of Christ, a faith that distorts and convolutes the gospel of Jesus Christ so that it can unify the sheep or the would-be sheep or the were sheep with the goats. It's the apostasy. And believe me, what is the deception going to revolve around? One thing, one phrase. And Jesus literally spoke the words. This is what the deception will revolve around. Who do men say that I am? There it is. That's what the deception will revolve around. It will revolve around who men say that Jesus is. And for those of us who are steadfast to the gospel of Jesus Christ, again, as laid out by He Himself and by His disciples, are going to be looked at as, what's the word? We're going to be the guys that are, I can't even think of the word right now. I can only think of phrases that aren't appropriate on the radio. We're going to be belittled and looked down upon, and we're going to be looked at as the guys that are just preaching fear. I heard somebody say the other day, listen, I heard a very, very popular quote-unquote prophetic person the other day make this statement. Those who are preaching fear, i.e. talking about the Ebola virus, i.e. talking about the New World Order, talking about all these different things that we talked about tonight, giants and all this kind of stuff, those who are preaching fear, basically me and Sheila and Steve and Doug and Joe and everybody else, this guy actually said that the Lord told him are going to begin to be taken out. Taken out. And then, of course, he added, by the Lord. They're going to begin to be taken out. Okay? That and I think that this person, I believe he has a connection to the occult, and I think he has inside information, and I think he meant literally. That's the way that we're going to be seen. We are obstacles to this wonderful religion that is all-inclusive. It includes Jesus. It's still worship of Jesus. Everybody still believes that He is a Messiah. And those of us who hold fast to the faith. And just like Sheila was saying, this is what it says. This is what I just read, verse 23. If indeed, this is 1 Colossians, verse 23, if indeed you continue in the faith, and you who were once alienated and enemies in your mind by wicked works, yet now He has reconciled in the body of His flesh through death to present you holy and blameless and above reproach in His sight, if you continue in the faith, grounded and steadfast, and are not moved away from the hope of the gospel which you heard. Not the hope of heaven, not the hope of some great kingdom, not the hope of the elimination of racism and hunger and peace and joy for mankind. No, that's not what he's saying. If you are and are not moved away from the hope of the gospel which you heard. From who? From Jesus and from his disciples.
Absolutely. And Second Thessalonians, I think is really important. I say this verse in the Bible a lot on our show. It says, "Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day will not come until the rebellion occurs, and a man of lawlessness is revealed, the man doomed to destruction." And people like you and Sheila and the Hagmans, you guys are the ones that are seeing them being revealed. The man of lawlessness literally being revealed in front of our very eyes. And we see these people being not just some of our family members, but some of the people that surround us in our daily lives are literally flocking and following those lawless ones, the ones that are referred to as the lawlessness of man. And, I thought that was one of the important things, since you brought that up, the revelation about the rebellion. And when you talk about the current times that we're in, the Second Thessalonians, that really sums it up for us. That's where you, I, my co-host, Sheila, and all of us are coming into the picture here. The reason why we are speaking out the way we are is because we are seeing the lawlessness of man being manifested in front of our eyes, and we're seeing all these people follow them and proclaim them the leaders of themselves. And the way I look at this, it's so disheartening. It really is. I mean, Sheila, did you have anything you wanted to add on either what he was saying or?
Well, no, I think that key word again is if you continue in the faith. And I'm just every day. I'm not even stunned anymore. We're pummeled 6 ways to Sunday. But I know exactly who Tim is talking about in terms of that so-called prophet, and I think it's stunning that he's right. The wheat will be separated from the tares, and I think we're entering into that separation time right now. And honestly, when a so-called prophet says, anybody preaching fear, whatever. Don't talk about the Ebola thing because, of course, mandated vaccinations are coming. Dave Hodges and I'm actually taking over for Hagman's show at the end of the week here, and I'm going to really be busting open some stuff on the very nefarious connections that haven't even been talked about with new mandated Ebola vaccinations and the connections. And at the top of this food chain is really Satan. Like Tim really articulately said, forget the Illuminati, forget the New World Order. Not that we're not going to talk about it, but the key piece is, a long time of planning from Lucifer. So, we're seeing lawlessness abound. We cannot even keep up with the headlines. So I think there's that word is if you continue in the faith. When we're obstacles to Satan, we're going to have some heavy, we're going to be trying to be, taken out is a word that Tim used. And I think that's a very fair assessment. We are not impervious to some of these machinations. And I think it's just it's a key thing to really be under that protection right now. And I think somebody, maybe Jason said this best, is there is a time coming unlike anything that we've ever seen in mankind. And when Jesus says that, then there's going to be a problem. Fair enough?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's, there's nothing in this world that I see that is more important, and that's why I really not only just believe, but I know it's the reason why. I know that's why you, the Hagmans, and all of us are not what you call physically gathering together. but spiritually we are coming together, and that's why we are speaking out to the remaining audience and the few people who will listen to our expressions of the Spirit. And it's
a final thought that I have, Clinton, that I've got to jump off. And excellent job tonight, by the way, Timothy. And I just want to say, because I've done a lot of shows with Steve said one thing the other night on a show with me that really hit home to me. We were on this last Monday, and he said the phrase, we've had enough news headlines. I mean, we're not going to have an opportunity beyond the Internet probably much longer. And especially with all these CISPA and SOPA and all these nefarious, insidious kinds of legislation coming down to mess with so-called alternative media. I mean, our days are numbered on this kind of a venue. So people have to understand that, we can scream from the rooftops all day long, but the bottom line is people have to get this right. There is a very short time, and I really think it's really important that people start seeking God, seeking His face, not His hand. Like Pastor Langford said, God is not your bellhop, because we hear a lot of this prophetic, the prophecy and the, prosperity gospel abounds. And people need to really, they need to get their heads out of their butts and realize it's not a me thing right now. This is, where do you stand with God? There is a penalty for sin. The wages of sin is death, and it is not just grace covers everything. We need to be walking in that daily. So I think that's the key point is, we don't have a long time to be. How many more warnings can we give people, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I often think, Sheila, is I hear people say, one of the things that people say, that the negative things that people say concerning you, concerning Steve, concerning all these different people that have been out there for years and years, warning and warning and warning. Well, the common thing you hear is, well, they've been saying this for years. They've been saying this for years. They said that 10 years ago. They've been screaming about the New World Order. Yeah, that's called mercy. That's what that's called. That's not called ignorance. It's not called sensationalism. It's called mercy. Be thankful that God has given us time and has put these voices, such as Sheila, out there to warn people. It's Noah building an ark. And all these naysayers and critics out there, they look at Sheila, they look at Steve, and those are the two that are popping. There's many more, Dave and a lot of people, and they see them building an ark. And they're saying, you're crazy, you're stupid. The headlines aren't saying this. Facebook doesn't say this. My teachers aren't telling me this. But yet you're out here building an ark. Yes, that's precisely what's happening.
And Timothy, the question becomes, will you get on the ark, just like in the days of Noah?
Precisely. It's a very scary thought, because everybody knows, out of the multitudes of people who were alive in the antediluvian world, and there were billions, it wasn't just 100,000 or something, there were billions of people alive by all estimates, there were only eight people made it on the boat. And I'm not saying there's only going to be 8. I think there's millions at the end of the age. But in comparison with the human collective, it's going to be scant. The word remnant is literal. It's literal. And so, most of the people are going to throw rocks and sit back and scoff at the ark builders. And that's who these voices are who have been out there. They're ark builders. And so, just like Noah, the people are going to stand with their arms crossed. They're going to go to the internet, the chat rooms, and they're going to blast these people, call them every name in the book. And they were saying that back in 1995. My response to you, if it's a person listening, thank God. That's called mercy.
Amen.
Absolutely. That's profound. Since you put it that way, there's one heck of a definition there, and I've heard the same thing. I hear it all the time, sometimes on a weekly basis, especially if I'm trying to which my objective in this is not to guide or direct anyone in any way, rather yet just show them, like, hey, look at this, and then, it'll open their eyes, and they will be able to go from there. But I don't know how I've went as far as I have. Seeing what I saw with these they mean well, their intentions are good, but when it comes to the rejection, over and over, some of these people have heard the same thing for 15, 20 years, sometimes even 40 or 50 years, and they just blow it off like it's not going to happen, and they fail to see why it is happening and how come it never happened before up until now. And it is then, that's proof. That's like saying, hey, there is a deeper meaning for this. There's a reason why you're seeing all these people from every corner of the earth in small numbers, even though they're small. There is people that are just coming out of these pockets and voicing out on what they're seeing on this earth. And blessed be God for you, Tim, and blessed be God for you, Sheila, for your voice. Because if it wasn't for your voice, may had one soul not been saved. May had one soul not been shown to the Lord. And that reward is going to be given to you when we meet the Father in heaven. I can guarantee you it. It's not a belief. I know. It's just a matter of time. And unfortunately, we've got about 10 minutes left. And before I let you guys end it up, I want to thank you solemnly from my heart on speaking from your spirit the way you have, Tim and Sheila. It's more than an honor to have you on our show, and I'm hoping that you'll be wanting to be on here more often, because I tell you what, I myself enjoy every minute of what you have to say, because it's nice to feel somebody else with that same connection. And when I say feel, it's an indescribable feeling. You all know it. You've experienced it. It's a connection that words can't bring unless somebody else is foretelling those words. And it's just a powerful connection, that we're all sharing. And I value that. I really do. It's one of the most treasured things the Lord has given me right now. And it's the ability to literally feel the hearts of others, to literally be a part of who they are. And you guys expressed yourselves very well. Sheila, I support everything you do, and every weekend that you put forth with the Hagmans to speak out the way you have. You guys have it. It is the literal spirit manifested through you from the Lord. And it's the Lord that's given you guys the everyday strength to get up and do what you do. And I want to keep driving you. I want to keep motivating you in any way that I can, because that is my goal. That is my pledge, is to make sure those around me have that same connection, and they keep on fighting for that. They keep fighting for the Lord and for the fellow man beside them. Greater love has no man than a man to lay his life down for his friends. And I know if the time came, I would gladly give up my life for you guys, just for the simple fact that I know that your definition is just as equal as I. And you guys bring that out. I really thank you.
Well, I thank you fellas for what you guys are doing, and I appreciate your effort, and it's highly commendable, and there's not many voices out there, so it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there, to open yourself up to that ridicule, and I think you fellows are doing a great job. So I don't really have much more to say tonight, and probably going to get cut off here any minute anyways, right? So just a blessing to you guys, Sheila. Thank you for having me on this evening, and I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely,
thank you, guys.
brother.
I appreciate that, too. God bless you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheila. You guys, it's been a great show. We're going to go ahead and call it even, and I thank you, Mass, my co-host, Jason. Man, it's always good to have you on the show as well. From the bottom of my heart, without you, this this would be a heck of a lot harder. Thank you for all the callers on the list and the listening audience. You all have a wonderful and blessed evening, and may we approach these times with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Good night, guys. God bless.
Night.